Coming up on this episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover.
This is the legitimate best chance they have to go to and win a Super Bowl. So at the minimum, again, here we are again, it's at least reach the AFC Championship.
Welcome to Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. This is our AFC South preview. Just me and Joe for the majority of the episode this week. But Joe, how are you doing? Looking forward to covering the AFC South?
Yeah, doing good. It's a strange one. Again, the AFC South, similar to the NFC South, is certain teams. But I think this year, it's after what happened last year, it's certainly a more interesting division. I think there's certainly some top teams and some big changes what's happened with the others, which I think will certainly boost their prospects this year. So other than the NFC South is the comparison. I think AFC South is actually really interesting. There's a lot to try and fit into 4 headlines. There's a lot we have to keep out. So it's a really exciting division, I think, and looking forward to getting into it.
And get into it we will. We start out, we're going to go with our Texans. We've got a special guest for the Texans. There's our deep dive. We've got Garett, Texans Stressing, does Texans coverage on Twitter, all over social, truthfully. So that's me and Paul going to be talking to Garett, and we'll jump over to there right now.
First up in our AFC South preview, it's our team in focus, and it's the Houston Texans, and we've got a fantastic guest to join us to preview the Texans. We've got Garett Williams joining us from Houston Stressans. Garett, welcome to Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Look forward to a good convo, but yeah, I'm doing good.
Excellent, good stuff. You run Houston Stressans, and we can follow you, and you can find Garett at Texans Commenter. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about Houston Stressans, kind of how you started with it, what is it we can look forward to kind of seeing and checking out if we follow you?
Yeah, so I'm just, a born and raised in Houston sports fan ever since I could walk and talk. I've just been obsessed with Houston sports. I had played football in college, so have a background with the sport, a decent knowledge of X's and O's. Was always kind of somebody like in the weeds as far as Twitter goes, on my own personal account. And then one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to get my own account. And it kind of was a selfish motive, to get my takes out there. I was like, I knew I should have called that. So, but yeah, it kind of just naturally, organically just evolved in what it is to today, doing shows. I'm on X, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, got a podcast as well. So it just kind of naturally evolved. And a big part of what I do too is I've always been the kind of fan that likes to watch interviews. So I feel like you can pick up on a lot of things, game plan or just updates. So I just took the extra step I already watch them. Now just kind of clip things that I find interesting and share those. So, that's been it. It's been fun. I've evolved, and it's an extreme passion of mine.
Excellent. Well, you talk about evolving. We've seen you sat down recently, and I don't think you've released it yet, but sitting down with Wyatt Teller. I'd seen you were at Tommy Togai's event, maybe the weekend. So yeah, kind of tell us about that. The Wyatt Teller interview must have been real cool to sit down and be able to speak with obviously with one of the Texans there and then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to mention too, my name, Stressans. I came up with that because it was the first year in D'Amico Ryans with the Texans. Every game since then has essentially come down to the wire, and it's a stressful experience. So people have resonated with that. But yeah, so I've been, lucky to kind of build my brand and my credibility. I've had some other player interviews earlier in this offseason, Jawar Jordan, a backup running back, Dominique Robinson, defensive end they signed, formerly of the Bears. But yeah, most recently was my first in-person one with Wyatt Teller, and it was incredible. It was awesome. He was there, his wife, his 2 kids, and we went to a barbecue spot. My friend Harley, shout out Harley with Wheelhouse Media Co., got the whole setup. So that'll be released hopefully later today, but we talked for an hour on camera, probably an hour before, and then had lunch with him after. I was just blown away at how down to earth he was, a genuine guy. And I already was a huge fan of him prior, and even more so now after. And then, later the day, I was able to go to a community event with Tommy Togiai. To me, he's the most underrated defensive player in the NFL, in my opinion. I know he's starting to get more notoriety, but the guy's a stud. He's a great guy too. So, and I've been able to go to other events. Earlier this year, I went to Woody Marks's charity bowling event. Kamari Lassiter had a softball event where I saw a bunch of the players. So it's fun to kind of get integrated into that whole thing. So
Excellent. Yeah, really, really cool. And we'll look forward to that. So make sure, so by the time this comes out, you'll be able to see and watch and listen to Garett's interview with Wyatt Teller as well, which would be really, really cool. And yeah, maybe Tommy Togiai, most underrated defensive player, possibly most underrated offensive player as well, the way the Texans had started to utilize him a bit. Maybe we'll see.
That is true. Good call there. Good call.
Maybe see a bit more of that in 2026. So let's get to our preview in detail then of the Houston Texans. First up, we do look back at 2025. Texans second in the AFC South. Who had won it the previous 2 years. In the playoffs, fell 28-16 to the Patriots in the divisional round. Ranked 13 on scoring offense and second on scoring defense, according to Pro Football Reference. Garett, for you, it was a third year in the postseason, third year with a playoff win. How did you feel about how 2025 went for the Texans?
My expectations were higher. Obviously, for Texans fans, the big thing is making it to the AFC Championship game, a thing that's never been done, and that was like a set out goal for theirs. And obviously, they fell short. I think what really hindered them in hindsight was that 0-3 start. And it kind of cost you your seeding and potential home games. And you saw in the playoffs, unfortunately, whether you want to admit it or not, the weather was a factor for the Texans in both playoff games, but obviously most notably the Patriots game. So, but when you sit down and kind of have time to stew on it, in the moment, it seems a lot worse than what it was. Like, it definitely wasn't what we wanted and hoped, but I still feel like they're in good position. But yeah, so like if you kind of look at context and nuance, Nick Caley, first-time play caller, new offense where Stroud supposedly wanted this offense where he wanted more control of the offense before with Bobby Slowick and the Shanahan scheme. A lot of the protections would go to the center, so his responsibilities were kind of dialed down. So all of a sudden now it's, it seems to be kind of like the New England Patriot, Earnhardt Perkins style offense where not only the quarterback, but receivers, running backs, everyone kind of has more responsibilities and autonomy. So if you look at it through that lens, it's tough because they are like with that defense, and people now know that that's an elite defense. Like I had seen the signs, late in 2023 and then obviously in 2024, but going into 2025, I was like, this defense has a chance to be historically great. And I think they were, but they were kind of robbed of it because of the offense. But my point being is, I guess a lot of us, and I get it, like see like, okay, this is a win now opportunity. But now that I'm kind of sitting back, I think they could have maybe gone with a different direction of the offense, whether it was keep Slowick or done some other kind of offense. They could have gone with a quick temporary solution to get them a better chance to win last year. But I think they're going with like the long sustained approach. With an offense that takes time to build, but over the years, it'll set you up. I think that's their vision. So with that in mind, pretty good overall. I know the offense had ended bad, but, there was growth. There was some good signs from the play caller, Stroud, everybody else. But yeah, I guess we'll get into it later. But, I think there's no way around it. The game with Stroud and New England was bad. But I do think there's a lot of nuance and context to it. I think he's being overly criticized and hated, but oddly enough, I think that can actually be good. Like I'm kind of looking at it through the lens of, hey, if the Texans were never going to go to the Super Bowl anyways, or never won it anyways, you might as well have had it end in that fashion to where now your quarterback is forced to lock in. Because I still don't think personally they may have beaten Denver against the backup in Denver, and I surely don't think that they would have beaten the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. The offensive line, the run game we had talked about was just too far behind for that to happen. So disappointing, but I'm optimistic looking forward.
And now because of obviously the I suppose success from DeMeco Ryans coming in and the three postseason appearances, 3 wins in the playoffs, they've done that so consecutively now. Amongst Houston Texans fans, then, Garett, are the expectations for the next step to be taken now? And is there kind of that pressure from the fan base and outside that they do move to that next level?
Yeah, so it was there last year, and it's even more so this year. But then, last offseason, the second year of Stroud, offensive line was an issue. And a lot of us and fans, media, et cetera, thought the way that they approached it in the offseason was kind of suspect, and I bought into their approach. But in hindsight, it seems like most of us were right. This year, it seems like they finally actually took it seriously. Getting Wyatt Teller, getting Braden Smith, re-signing Ed Ingram, drafting Keelan Rutledge, who can play center and or guard. They seem to be more serious about it this year. And then obviously, I think a big factor last year, we all know Joe Mixon, the mysterious deal. It seems like they were blindsided by that, but like losing a back like that, even though the O-line was inferior in pass pro and in run blocking, he was able to mask a lot of that. But then now you have a Nick Chubb who's, coming off injury in the back end of his career, and a Woody Marks who was a good back, but maybe was thrust into a role that he doesn't quite fit him, wasn't quite ready yet, even though he did good within that. But now you add David Montgomery, so they seem to be, they realize, hey, and what's funny too is like Nick Caley was getting a lot of flack last year because they asked him like about halfway through the season, like, what is your identity of this offense? What do you want it to be? He's like, I want to be like a downhill physical running team. Everyone just laughed at him. And it's, I think he can have that vision, but it wasn't necessarily his fault for the reason why it didn't happen. And so now, we talked about O-line, we talked about running back. A big thing last year too was, he probably wants to use, from my guesstimation, from him having a background with the Rams, from being a former tight ends coach, wants to run a lot of heavy personnel with 2 and 3 tight end sets. But before the year, you had Cade Stover get hurt early in the year. You had Brevin Jordan get hurt. I mean, they were kind of bare bones, and he was handcuffed. We had to run, a jumbo package with a 6 offensive lineman and Blake Fisher for like almost most of the season. And those situations, it was a 2-man route concept if you threw it, but it was like a known running down. So all that to be said, like the expectation is right back where it was last year. And as a lifelong Houston Texans fan, this is the legitimate best chance they have to go to and win a Super Bowl. So at the minimum, again, here we are again, it's at least reach the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, excellent. It just kind of feels like, you talk about windows a lot in the NFL, but it just feels like having how good that defense is, it's just got to be capitalized upon. And we'll get into that, I suppose, with some of the headlines. Let's get into it then. Off-season headline 1, let's start with that defense. Will Anderson getting sacks and stacks. Becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Other defensive players also receiving contracts, Hunter rankings, Al-Shahir, Speed. Yeah, I mean, Anderson's obviously part of this success that's been going on the last 3 years. Obviously, we saw Stroud and Anderson come together. Just how, I mean, I don't know. I kind of still think he's not getting the props that he deserves. Just how good has he been, Garrett, in kind of this run?
And that's Will Anderson you're saying? I'm sorry?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because I feel like some people are catching on. Like Adam Schefter recently on his podcast said he puts him right up there with Myles Garrett. So it's good to hear it from someone like that, but you really don't hear it quite as much. But, it could be part of the deal with a lot of the Texans, kind of like Nico Collins and, like Andre Johnson, like a former great Texan. And maybe they're a smaller market, so you don't get pumped up as much. But I do feel like the guys that are like more quiet and reserved and less flashy don't. And I'm not saying Myles Garrett or whoever else is like that, but I mean, that is an element to it. But and he's young, and I think this year, he definitely will not get that, but there is an element to it. But he's incredible. Like, I mean, the trade up for him was worth every penny at the moment in the time that it happened. Some people, I could see why scrutinized it. And in hindsight, it was a no-brainer. And I think a big reason why they were willing to do that was obviously not only his athletic ability, but his character, like his leadership. Like him and CJ Stroud, they got 2 core foundational pieces in terms of like culture building, mindset, work ethic, all that stuff. So yeah, when it came time for him to be due, obviously his production made it easier. We'll talk about Stroud at the end of the show, I believe. And so that was probably like the lowest hanging fruit to take care of that one first. I mean, quarterback along with edge rusher, are like 2 of the highest paid, but also 2 of the most important positions. And he was worth every penny, I mean, and we'll talk about it later when it comes to Stroud. Everyone gets hung up on APY. There is context and nuance. You have to consider the year they're signed and when that actually goes into effect. But Nick Caserio, like, along with these other signings, a lot of fans will be like, oh, like it's all defense, it's all whatever. I think it's just kind of the order of what it shook out. But Nick Caserio, what I like is kind of taking a page out of the Patriots and something the Eagles are known for with Howie Roseman is when you're convicted in a player, you extend them as soon as possible to take advantage of the time value of money with the ever-rising cap. So I'm a big fan of it, and it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, and he just seemed like, say, a lot of it was trying to bring those pieces together because, yeah, obviously a lot of fantastic defensive players, but it's the strength is in the unit as a whole, I think. And Byron, just a quick one, just chipping, because I appreciate we haven't gone to use it as yet. That kind of just bringing all the pieces back together, does that just signify again that we're expecting this Texans defense to be at the same level, if or better than it was last year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and like you mentioned, Garrett, doing it like the Patriots way, the Harry Roseman way. Me and Paul support the other team in Texas, and we look on very enviously when this kind of thing happens, because it's very much not the Cowboys way. So, we talk about it. Feels like every other division preview with like, they pay their stars early. It's really I would say the only way to build winning teams in the NFL nowadays is, you want to hit on your draft picks, but what you need to do is pay your players as early as possible, because then you get the advantage in time. And, we see the list of players here, but Will Anderson is obviously a headline piece for a good reason. One of the elite pass rushers in the NFL already 3 years into his career. And you've got him locked down now for, into his peak. And it's just a smart way to do business. You don't want to be looking at maybe trading to Green Bay in 2 years because you can't agree on a deal. Of course, it signifies that you win now, and the chips are fully in with the Texans this year, I feel. So.
Yeah, and like my wife, she's a Cowboys fan, so and obviously Houston's close to Dallas, so I got plenty of Dallas Cowboys fans. But yeah, Jerry Jones is like the inverse of Nick Caserio, Howie Roseman, and not only that, and what's funny too is like a lot of these deals that Nick Caserio does at the time, like you can tell that like if he's convinced, he's like, whatever, dude, if I pay X amount % higher than what people think, and if I reset the market, Derek Stingley, it's not going to last long. Nico Collins several years ago, they extended him early and people thought that was like the worst deal. It's like the best deal in football. You're making 23, 24 million APY to the point where you had to like restructure to give him more guarantee to make him happy. But yeah, I mean, and maybe you may not go ahead. Yeah.
Indianapolis end up paying like Alec Pierce. And who would you have on your roster? I mean, we think Alec Pierce is a fun player, sure, but Nico Collins, one of our favorites, again, not Texans fans necessarily, but man, that guy is just a dog. You get him the ball roughly anywhere on the field and he might take it to the house. And you see what players, Christian Kirk got paid all that money in Jacksonville a few years ago. And you tie your player up early and you will, 9 times out of 10, it feels like get good value on it, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of their philosophy is like in the draft, they get good character guys, so there's less risk of things going awry. And if it does go awry, it's because you misevaluated performance, not because of off the field stuff. And so you already know these are good character guys. And then if they are, that's what's funny too, is like, a lot of people like Nico at the time is like, oh, you still got to prove it. I don't know. Well, it's like they have been in the building. Like, yes, we all saw the 1 year. Like they know who he is. Like they don't need our opinion to think that he's good. Like, and even then too, let's just say that they gamble a little bit. And let's just say that you think he's, at this rating of a player and it turns out he's actually here and he might overpaid. Worst case, the time value kind of eats that up. So,
yeah.
And then with Micah Parsons, like not only are you missing out on like the actual financial and budgeting and planning part of it, but you're like, it's just bad business. Like you saw like the slinging publicly, like you can't tell me like one that obviously had effect on Micah. He's like, I don't feel wanted. Like,
yeah.
And then now the player kind of has the hand here of like, get me out of here. Like, I don't want to play for you. So you're kind of forced to trade him. But there has to be bleed over. Like, that's just not a good culture. Like other players, like, oh, you're treating my friend like that. Like, am I next? Like, I don't know. I don't like how they do that. So
totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. If only we could find a way to change it, Garrett, we really, really would.
Well, supposedly the son's worse, right? Or he's the one doing it.
Yeah. We've got another 40 years to look forward to it. It's all good. Right, let's move on. Let's talk about the Houston Texans offensive line. O-line looking fine. We talked about it a little bit in the start. Wyatt Teller, Braden Smith, and Kalen Rutledge in through the draft. You mentioned it, Garrett, that they've tried to fix the O-line. I think they've had a couple of goes at it now of trying to kind of fix it. What makes you real confident that this time they've got the right pieces?
I think worst case, the big takeaway is the depth. Like the depth is so much better. And like last year when Trent Brown came in like halfway through the season, the O-line wasn't that bad. They were closer to average than what they were the rest of the year. But you saw in the Patriots game, all of a sudden he was a game time decision, couldn't go. And one, aging veteran Trent Brown injury shook up the whole line, O-line. Now Titus goes from left guard to right tackle, and now Jarrett Patterson goes to left guard, and the whole thing went to crap. So, I mean, that spoke to the depth, right? You had one injury away from it being an okay-ish O-line to terrible. Whereas now, like, we'd even mentioned Evan Brown as a veteran that can come in there and play. You got Trent Brown, who was a starter last year, probably going to be a backup to Braden Smith or a swing tackle at right tackle. Blake Fisher played some games for us. He's now like the fourth tackle on the depth chart. And Keelan Rutledge, I hope he starts at center. He probably will and should. If not, he could be a potentially starting guard, but you got Ingram there as well. You still, and now Jake Andrews, who was essentially a rookie last year, was our starting center, and now he becomes a depth piece. Just 1 through 8, 9, 10 is much better than what it was last year. So, but I will say this too: like Nick Caserio gets a lot of criticism, as he should, for the O line, but he's kind of been dubbed as like, oh, he's a great GM, but he just can't scout O line. I think there is some nuance to it, and this may be overstated for me to kind of add this perspective, but you have to kind of factor in scheme. The first 2 years under D'Amico was wide zone, so you kind of look for a little bit different type of O-lineman, more of the agile, cerebral types, where now you want the bigger, mauler, physical guys downhill in this gap scheme. Obviously, Caserio was there before D'Amico, and there's no excuse on the Kendon Green one. That was just a flop. That was a bust. But some of the guys that he got, Blake Fisher, he kind of fits more of the zone scheme, in my opinion. So obviously that wasn't quite a hit there, but he drafted Arante Ursary last year. That was a big hit in early second round. And then the fact that he inherited some of these pieces. You inherited Laramie Tunsil, who was, a Pro Bowl, really good player, but he also was a huge cap hit. And then you inherited Titus Howard, who I thought was overhated and underrated, but still. Anyways, it took. My point is, like, it takes time to kind of overturn that whole unit. You can't just like overnight, especially when you have big contracts like that. So, I think this year is finally the year that it actually looks legit. And yeah, I'm excited about it. And Cole Popovich, the second year now O-line coach, I think is a big part of it as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the next 2 points that we've got kind of fall off the back of that. We'll talk about the running game a little bit first then. The running game gets demonstrably better, and David Montgomery comes in by trade from Detroit as Mixon and Chubb leave town. Does the Monty and Woody pairing bring a buzz to the room? Toy Story gag for the show. Very good timing for that. But yeah, I suppose obviously a bit of a change. Obviously, big change. Obviously, Montgomery was in that pairing in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs, the Sonic and Tails, Sonic and Knuckles. Which one was it? Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic and Tails, whichever one it was. Yeah, Sonic and Knuckles. Sorry, my 90s gaming knowledge just fell out of my brain there. But yeah, he's had that partnership. How do you feel kind of this Montgomery and Woody Marks kind of tandem is going to work for Houston?
So yeah, I mean, as we talked about earlier, the rushing attack of how they want to do it is downhill, physical, inside rushing team. And, they didn't really have the personnel on the O-line or running backs last year. Excuse me. But a lot of the concepts that they like to run are duo and inside zone. And, when looking at getting a running back this year, when we knew Joe Mixon wasn't going to be back for this year, I had heard, of the David Montgomery being unhappy and potential, trade rumors. And, there wasn't – I didn't think a lot of the free agent running backs like Kenneth Walker and some of the other top guys were, rational for the Texans. They were way overpriced. And so I kind of looked into – I know Nick Caserio likes to get creative and trade for players, and that's kind of like his free agency in certain aspects. And I had 2 guys that I thought would be perfect, absolute perfect fit. One was Josh Jacobs, which there was a potential for him to be traded because of his contract, the way it made sense for Green Bay. And the other was David Montgomery. And I was pounding the table. I was like, he is a perfect fit for this offense. He'll be great value, and he's extreme value. And so a lot of people think, oh, he's a backup. He's old. He sucks. Like, just because you were a backup doesn't mean you weren't productive. It's not an indictment on you. I mean, he was very productive with Detroit. He was, ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs in his rookie year. But just because you're the 1B to Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't mean that you're, the 36. People look at it like, oh, you're a backup, you're automatically below 32nd ranked running back. That's not really how it works. So, and then as far as the pairing, a lot of people too initially might have thought, oh no, like they just got David Montgomery. That's bad news for Woody Marks. I think it's great news for Woody Marks. As I said earlier, he got thrust into a role as a rookie that really didn't fit him and he wasn't quite ready for. But Woody Marks at Mississippi State had a season where he caught 80+ passes in a season. He was basically a receiver. And so I had the chance to talk to him like I mentioned earlier, at the charity event, and obviously from his other interviews this spring. But he's been working a lot at receiver. He's been like running drills with the receivers. And that was a big part of our game we didn't have last year, was like we didn't really throw to our running backs. And that can be something that can help a CJ Stroud, to have those more easy button play calls where maybe you run 2-back sets and then you flex Woody out as a receiver and get an advantageous matchup. Maybe he's on a linebacker or more screens. So I think that Woody will be productive. And Woody Marks, although he's smaller than David Montgomery, which, by the way, both of them have lost weight. David Montgomery was 235. He's down to 225. I'm not sure why, but Woody Marks has lost, roughly 10 pounds as well. But I think that they have a good 1-2 punch, and I think he's a change of pace, but he's a smaller back, and people assume that he'd be more of an outside scout back. But he's pretty tough and physical inside the tackles. I think he's a better in between the tackles runner, just from his style. He's not really a bruiser per se. But yeah, it'll be a great combo. And they got some depth too. Jawar Jordan, who I mentioned, I interviewed, I'm very high on him. He's more of the quicker outside guy if you want to run some more zone. Yeah, I'm excited. I think it'll be much improved, and that's really what it comes down to. That's why I'm high on this team this year. If the Texans can have an average rushing offense and not the 31st, 32nd ranked offense like rushing like it's been the past 2 years for CJ Stroud, then we can actually have an offense that can complement our defense.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? I think that's probably the theme that we're going to talk through about the Texans as a whole, finding that balance and offense, having to do a little bit more of the work for sure. Well, let's get into that last piece then, and we could talk about CJ Stroud more generally, but the point I suppose we want to hone in on QB contract extension shrouded in mystery. 5-year extension picked up. Does the extension come this summer? What does that look like? First of all, Garett, from your perspective, 3 years of CJ Stroud since he was taken second overall, how would you assess his, first 3 years of his career so far?
They've been great. I mean, I definitely think I'm in the minority, like on this whole topic. I know a lot of people just think he's the worst quarterback ever. Get rid of him. Don't extend him. Why would you pay him? All this nonsense. But I think there's a lot of ways you have to look at this picture to kind of understand why people may be thinking like that. I think it starts with his rookie year. I think his rookie year was awesome. It was phenomenal, but I do think it may have been overstated a little bit, and I may be guilty in that. I think that's where it starts. And then the next 2 years, people think were the worst years ever, and they weren't. And so like you overhyped and then over criticized when really he was here and like here. He's kind of been along the same level, and people just want to look at stats. Like even last year, I don't think it was a bad season at all. Like obviously with playoffs, that's separate, but like regular season, even then people say he sucked in the regular season. I don't think he did. He was in a new offense. And it's kind of ironic too. People are like, you got this good defense. All you got to do is manage the offense and be a game manager. And then he doesn't. Like, well, why aren't you throwing touchdowns? Like, well, which one is it? Like the guy can't win, So I do think that he kind of settled into that role, and he was learning. And that's a challenge too. Like with the young quarterback, your whole life, you've played football in the way that your team wins because of you and your playmaking. And now all of a sudden you're being asked to kind of contain it. So it sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but I mean, like when it's in your blood just to go like and ball out and make plays, and now you're like, hey, just throw the ball away. You're like, dang, this is boring, bro. But he did do a good job, and the numbers kind of show that. And like D'Amico talked about it all year, like throwing the ball away, not taking sacks. You couple that with, learning the offense. You couple that with having no tight ends, with no run game, bad interior line. So I think he's matured a ton in the next 2 years, even though people think he's played worse. The stats aren't as good, but I think he's a better quarterback today than what he was. And so I think that was the first part of your question. I'm not sure what was after that.
Well, let's have it, because I don't think there's a doubt that the Texans will extend him. I think it'd be a crazy situation to for CJ Stroud not to be at the Texans moving forward. But what do you think that looks like in terms of where then CJ sits in the list of quarterbacks? And we talk about, obviously, APY not being necessarily the best way to look at it, but what would be sort of a comparable quarterback that you think he would be in line with from a money perspective?
Well, I've been working on an article like all off season, and it's like the longer I wait, it's like I'm like kind of hesitating to put it out, but it's like a super deep dive on this whole topic. It's like anytime it's been mentioned, and like showing how they've stood by him, they didn't bench him, like all the remarks, how he's our guy, he's our leader, etc. But so I think When I say the number, people will freak out. But first, I will say, like, a lot of people won't say what you said, that they should extend him. But like, if that's the logic for me, it's like just like I said, Nico and Will, like, they knew that they were their guy, and they've seen him play. And it's like, if you know it, then just do it now, rather than say, let's prove it another year. But a lot of fans and people are like, oh, he needs to prove it another year, which I think that they're looking, recency bias that last game, whereas Caserio and D'Amico are probably looking at big picture. Like, this has been pretty solid, dude. But if that's the logic, if you think you're going to extend him anyways, you don't want to wait till next year, because if you wait till next year, you now have Drake May, you have Caleb Williams, you got potentially Lamar Jackson, you got Bo Nix, and a couple other quarterbacks now entering the market on top of another increase in the cap. It goes 7 to 10% the past 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. It's $301 million now. It's going to be even higher next year. You're talking like 70 million APY potentially. Right now, there's really not much competition as far as other quarterbacks. It's him and Bryce Young, and then Baker Mayfield is going to get a deal, so maybe they're waiting on that. The starting point is 55 million, and some people are saying 45, 50. There's no way in hell. And even then, too, like 55 million, that's Trevor Lawrence. He signed his deal 2 years ago. The cap was $225 million then. So, like, it's not apples to apples. I feel like people aren't understanding this. So it's like, if you're his agent, like, you're not even going to entertain 55 million, in my opinion, because like the way that it should be evaluated is it's the percent of cap at the year of signing. Even though, too, like, this is on top of also you're doing it early, where he has 1 year left on his contract plus a fifth year. So this, whatever, if there was an extension done now, the first year wouldn't be until the third year. So this is like in the future. But regardless, like, whatever the number would be divided by 301 million. So if you divided like 50, and so if you do that apples to apples, the percent of cap at year of signing, like, Trevor Lawrence was 21.5%. Like, I think most of us can agree that he's a pretty comparable quarterback to Trevor Lawrence, especially if you look at it like at the time when he signed, where Trevor Lawrence was. That was a very hotly debated topic, and now it's not as bad because he had half of one good season, so but if you were to extrapolate 21.5% of 301 million, you're looking at close to 64 million APY. So it's like, I think people are going to freak out if and when the Texans do. If they do it this year, it's going to be above 60. I would think it would be anywhere from 62 to 64, and people are going to see the number and like, oh, he's getting almost 10 million more than Trevor Lawrence. But it's like, no, we're in 2026. It's going to be in 2028 that he starts making that money. And then the first year of that deal, you defer a lot of it anyway. So to long answer to your question, if they do, I think it'll be 62 to 64 million, and people are going to lose their ever freaking minds and not look at the context.
Yeah, I think what we always talk about, certainly on this show, I think between the three hosts, the most difficult thing to find is a franchise quarterback. It is, you see teams that struggle and have gone through God knows how many, we'll use the Browns and the Jets maybe as examples, who just never find the guy for any longer than a stretch of a couple of games. But and it is so difficult, and I think it's just you pain if you've got one or you believe you've got one. I just think you just don't let them walk out the door. I think it's crazy. It's crazy to let them walk. And yeah, the way it is now, the person is just always gonna, the next one is always gonna pretty much reset the market or be close to it, because it is the most most important position in sports. It is the most difficult position to get right, and yeah, you don't want to let go of a good one, or if you think you've got a good one, you certainly don't want to let them walk out the door.
And like you say, the line always goes up as well. Like you say, it's going up 7, 5, 10%. As soon as those broadcasting rights get redone, it might go up 12% in the near future. And again, we've mentioned Harry Roseman already. Like, he's put loads of money into those 2028 hits for a good reason, because we know the broadcasting rights will get redone, and the NFL is still the number one ticket in America. So that, 21%, it might look even smaller come, actually 2028, when that money does start counting towards the Texans cap. It's just an easy way to look at it. But like you say, people certainly will freak out when they see 60+ million.
Maybe I'm wrong, and obviously there's different ways you can do it, the amount of guarantee, the length of the contract. I don't know that, but like, to me, the way Caserio has done it is he kind of like Will Anderson Jr. is like a 3-year deal, like heavily guaranteed. So it's a win-win. You can kind of bring the APY down a little bit if you do that. That gives you as a team flexibility in case anything changes. It gives the player a quicker time to re-enter the market for another extension, which is, I'm sure, is what Stroud and his agent would want. Like, let's just say, but like if they, I mean, because if on his side, if you look at it from their perspective, like if you're not even talking in that range, like I'm not even talking, bro. Like if the whole talk is like all I have to do this year is just, hike the ball and win a Super Bowl and I don't have to do anything, then okay, then I'll do that and I'll make a bunch of money, So, but yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment and like that. And so like the easiest way to do it is percent of cap at signing. But your point is better. Okay, what's the percent of cap when the cap actually hits? Obviously, we don't know until after the fact, but that's the true way to do it.
Excellent. Hey, you get the financial education on NFL contracts here at Good Teams with Great Teams cover as well. So thanks for educating our viewers, Garett. Appreciate it. And let's get into some of the moves then. We've talked about some of them in free agency. We haven't talked, I think, probably one that we should talk about. Reed Blankenship in from the Eagles. I think a great signing. What impact are you hoping or expecting Blankenship to have for the Texans after a really good run with the Eagles?
I love it, man. I mean, he's obviously not like a super premier, dynamic, flashy name. But one position on DeMeco Ryans' defense that he's been trying to solve like ever since 2023, and the only guy that he's had at that position, the strong safety position, which is what Reba play, was Jimmy Ward. And he was an aging Jimmy Ward, and he was pretty good. But the one thing that he wants at that spot is a communicator, someone who's smart, that he can trust to be in the right place at the right time, to echo the calls, to now help your young ball hawking free safety. So this should unlock Kalen Bullock even further. And I've been kind of like workshopping this idea that, the DeMeco Ryans defense with Matt Burke is known as a defense that's just old school and runs the same, handful of schemes or plays and just says line up and play because they have, the talent, which is true. But I also think part of maybe why they don't disguise coverages quite as much, just one of the elements, maybe because they haven't had a trustworthy guy at the strong safety spot. Because what I've learned about DeMeco is he cannot stand a mental mistake. Like you can't beat yourself. And so now if you got someone you can trust, you can start to kind of throw more on their plate defensively. So I am very excited about it. And like culture-wise, he seems like an excellent fit. That is a very underrated signing.
Yeah, that the Eagles defense has been really, really strong for, I say, the last number of years, and he's been obviously a huge reason why that's been the case. So yeah, it feels like again, definitely, just add, a strong unit, just adding and improving, and it takes a lot to improve that defense because of how good it's been for Houston the last few seasons, but doing it by, so it's getting one of the best available players in free agency for sure. Is there anyone else that maybe we've not covered here, Garett, who you're excited from a free agency perspective that's come in, or anybody else who might be a big miss that's come out the door?
Well, I guess not necessarily free agency. I would say the draft. I would say Keelan Rutledge. I kind of glazed over that one, but just like how I heavily targeted David Montgomery as somebody that we needed in the run game, same thing for offensive line. Like I knew we needed, like, DeMeco Ryans has talked about, and part of this whole thing too with the offense trailing behind is DeMeco has spent his early years developing and molding his defense. And then last year was like the first time, I guess it was the end of 2024, which resulted in the firing of Bobby Slowick. Initially he was like delegating 100%. And now he's realized, okay, like now I got to start being involved on offense too, because you can tell the offense does not match the defense in terms of like mindset and physicality and stuff like that. So an offensive line, he's always talked about having guys that are nasty and mean and finish, and they really hadn't had that, but they've slowly been kind of adding those pieces. And so when I watch film scouting guys, you can tell the guys that are the maulers that fit that type. And Keelan Rutledge, I was at the Senior Bowl this year, and he stood out as a guy that was their first prospect I had interviewed, actually, believe it or not. And he was a perfect fit. I mean, obviously you go into mock draft season and he's a third and he's starting to rise to the second, and then he gets traded up for in the late first. So you're like, but consensus boards aren't always, what it's actually going to happen. So could have been a reach. I mean, I don't think so, but I'm excited about him. I know one thing from learning about him is he fits that, mental toughness. This guy is obsessed with football. Like he will make the center thing work. And he took snaps in college, and he was under Brent Key, who is a former lineman himself. Like, he'll be just fine. And then Caden McDonald, DeMeco Ryans, this kind of shows that he's willing to adjust. He's never had a one-tech nose tackle in his 3 years. The scheme at large under Robert Saleh is a wide 9, spaced out, more so undersized 3-tech defensive tackles. They're not really known for these big, heavy 2-gapping 1-tackle nose tackles. And so him going and getting that was probably the biggest weakness of this defense over recent years is runs up the middle. That'll be, maybe he won't play a ton. Maybe he's more situational. Maybe it's early downs to stop the run. But if that guy can get out there and provide some juice for us, that'll be big. The draft class, Wade Woodaz, former safety, long, rangy. I think he is a potential eventual replacement for Henry To'oTo'o at the weak will linebacker there. Kamari Ramsey's an underrated guy. He's another headhunter. Lewis Bond's a receiver drafted late out of Boston College who impressed in OTAs. He fills a potential need that I think the Texans still need is that grimy underneath slot receiver. Jalen Knoll is a slot, but to me, he's more of a vertical threat slot, and maybe he can be the underneath guy. But Lewis Bond played at Boston College under Bill O'Brien in this similar kind of Earnhardt-Perkins offense where it's a lot of cerebral, side adjustments, all that stuff. Aiden Fisher, he's a great pick too. Fabechi Wiwu, he's a stud as well from Oklahoma. He fits that nastiness. He's versatile. He's played all 5 offensive positions, but he'll probably start at guard. He could be a center later. Marlon Klein, a lot of people, think that's a reach, but, a lot of tight ends overall were drafted early. I was high on Nate Borkenshire, and the Jags took him way early. I was like, this guy's a stud, dude. He's sick. So what the Texans needed, a big part of the O-line gets a lot of flack, but part of the O-line and pass pro and run blocking is the tight ends as well and the running backs. And our tight end and running back blocking has not been good. Montgomery provides better pass pro. Marlon Klein, a big need for us and this fit the bill perfectly. I said we need a 6'6", 250-pound, inline, wide tight end who's a solid blocker with receiving upside. That's exactly what he is. So, And then as far as losses, Christian Kirk, I was underwhelmed on his performance with us. I thought he would come in and be that vet slot. He did some good things late, but he wasn't really that security blanket for Stroud. So losses, I don't really think there was too many. Are you able to put back up the other guys we lost on the screen just to kind of
we highlight a mix and settle. Howard, who we mentioned earlier on, and Christian Kirk as well.
So Mixon, he was already in our heads gone, but obviously missing him sucks. But Tim Settle, I love Tim Settle, man. He was a hell of a player. But him getting hurt late in the season last year allowed Tommy Togiai to emerge. And so as much as it sucked to lose Tim Settle, Tommy Togiai is already replacing that. And then you got Caden McDonald, like I mentioned. Titus Howard, I think we're improved overall, but he was definitely over-criticized as a Texan, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's not often we get to, obviously being here, not often we get to see some of these guys coming out in the draft, for example, beforehand. But I got to see Keelan Rutledge play for Georgia Tech against Florida State in Dublin to start the 2024 season.
Wasn't like a mud slop rainy game too or something?
Yeah, it was a big upside. I'm pretty sure Georgia Tech were 10 or more point underdogs and beat Florida State outright. They also had an Irish punter, which made it kind of great in Dublin as well. But Keelan Rutledge looked like a stud in that game and kind of was looking to see, okay, well, when he comes out, like where he's going to land. And it feels like he's making a big change, of course. But I think, I agree with you as well, Garett. I think he can do it and make that kind of adaptation to centre. But he looks like a stud, and I expect him big things from him. And we'll see if it helps fix those all-line problems that we're talking about. On that note, actually talking about getting to see players fully come out, we are going to get to see the Houston Texans because they are coming to London in that. And I just want to get your thoughts on this. How, given, again, it's a divisional game, a divisional road game against the Jags, is there a big upside to it for the Texans in terms of not having to go to Jacksonville and play? Obviously, they've got a lot going on in Jacksonville with changing and doing and grading their stadium. But how big of a leveler is it having a road division game in a neutral venue?
I guess I hadn't thought about it in terms of the Jags losing a home game. To me, it's still kind of a home game for them. And And like, I'm not saying this to like be a hater or anything, but like, I don't know how big of a home field advantage they had to begin with. Like the game we lost last year was just one of the worst games of the year, and we just pissed it away on our own. But yeah, so I do think the advantage though for Jacksonville is I'm 99.9% sure they have a game there the week before as well, so they're able to stay there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that matters that much. I know a lot of people just hate these games in general as fans, you know, but these guys are pros. At least it's like somewhat earlier in the year, and it is what it is. End of the day, you light up, snap the ball. So I personally kind of like it. I like the team getting, you know, different experiences and exposure and spotlight. I'll try to go to the game, and if y'all go, maybe I'll hit you guys up and meet up. But I don't know if I'll be there quite yet. But yeah, I mean, if you get your team developed the way that D'Amico wants it, which is elite defense, an offense that can run the ball, it don't matter if, when, where you play, that travels. So
yeah, so yeah, look forward to it. Like I see, it's probably one of the ones. Just in general, about what's still about, there's a little bit of an apathy from a UK perspective on some of these games now, primarily because the NFL are just taking the mick with the ticket prices. We've seen the Eagles game. I think the Eagles play the Colts, I want to say. No, Eagles play the Jaguars, sorry, yeah. Eagles play the Jaguars in the other game. That game sold out, and I think that's the pull of the Eagles coming in. And then the other game we've got is Commanders, Colts, and unbelievable. So many. Nobody wants to go watch that game. There's so many tickets left for the Commanders Colts game, and the Texans. The Jacksonville one at Wembley, which is the Texans one. Obviously, it's 90,000, so there's a lot more seats, 30,000 more seats to fill. But that typically gets a lot more tickets sell nearer to the time for that one. But I think with it being a divisional game, that's a good matchup. These are two, 12 plus win teams last season. So that should kind of attract, I think, a lot more tickets nearer the time. But yeah, there's a bit of apathy from the UK fans on the NFL taking the mick a little bit with some of the prices. We could do a whole hour on that, so we'll move on. Let's go and talk about where you're expecting the Texans to be. The line, the win total line for the Texans is 9.5. So the over is 10 to 13. The under is even money or plus 100, depending how you choose to like your odds. So that kind of seems to be the Vegas odds setters seem to kind of have the Texans around 10 wins. Garett, based on kind of everything we've talked about and the schedule and so on, where do you expect the Texans to be? Kind of where have you got them as their record for the year?
I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's like, what are we doing? But there's a lot of lines out there. Like as far as the over/under win totals, like as bad as the Texans were last year, they had 12 wins.
Yeah,
2.5 over that, or whatever that math is. I'm not mathing that well right now, but yeah. I mean, to me, like I think the reasonable floor is 12, but like the absolute floor is 11, and they for sure should get 10 wins. Last year's schedule was much harder. They didn't win the division this year, so it's still tough, but it's easier. And the thing about last year's schedule was not only was it hard, but like it was harder than we expected. Like no one knew the Seahawks would be the Seahawks. People didn't quite know the Broncos would be the Broncos. But it was the type of matchups they played. Like our biggest weakness was our interior offensive line, and we played like all 4 or 5 of the top interior defensive lines, and we lost pretty much every one of those games. So. Yeah, I think to start the year, they have, some tough teams, but they have teams where their defenses aren't very good and their run defense isn't very good, at least projecting over from last year. That could change, obviously, but the teams we're playing are known for better offenses. And if I had to have it one way or the other, like, hey, would you rather play offensive-led teams with bad defenses to start the year, or would you rather have defensive-led teams with bad offenses? I would choose the former. And so, and most of those games that have like these high-powered offenses are at home. So you get to play the Texans defense at home, which is like a whole nother animal. So, I mean, they could get off to a hot start. The end of the season's a tough stretch with the cold weather, all that stuff, but they could be most of the way there by the time that stretch of the season comes. So to me, it's an easy over. I know I'm biased, but
yeah, Byron, where have you got there? The Texans.
Yeah, every year I try to find like the most disrespectful line, and I think this might be it. I totally agree, Garett. I have the Texans at 13-4, and we'll get onto the next slide in a moment. But Texans are also my Super Bowl picks, so like, it's a really easy team to.
I knew I liked you, Byron. Texans Cowboys or what?
I wish.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I do think it will be interesting to see how the season starts, because I think that first 4 games is on paper pretty tough. You got the at home, but the Bills, Bengals, 2 really good offenses. At the Colts, we don't quite know what the Colts will be, and then host the Cowboys, again, really good offense. I have them going 3-1 in that spell, so I think they're also going to start well. But it is an interesting start. It could be, if the O-line doesn't hit the ground running, it could be a slight cause for concern. But I am 13-4, so I'm just trying to nitpick a little here, maybe to see how you could get them to 10 wins even. But under 9.5, I think would be crazy. So yeah, I might be
getting fired if that happened for sure.
Yeah, you would certainly think so. CJ Stroud's been a 10-win quarterback every year of his career, and as long as the O-line is not worse than last year, which is really, really tough to imagine. Like you said, the depth is improved. You mentioned Marlon Klein, who I like, also bringing in Foster Moreau to add that jumbo package, 13 personnel potential.
Sneaky good addition. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, I just think it all adds up to a very, very high baseline of competency. And if the O-line does improve to 20th in the league, then I really think the sky's the limit. Like I say, they're my Super Bowl pick. I have them 13-4, so I'm smashing the over here. I think it might be the most egregious line in the NFL at this point for me.
Yeah, I've got them over as well. I've got them a bit more conservative, 11 wins, but I agree. It's got to be north of that 10 wins. I just can't see how is it. So there's going to be a lot of disastrous things that happen. I think you're at the bookends of the schedule are tough. And they end up got 2 road games late in the year at Philadelphia, at Green Bay, across kind of Christmas and New Year. Yeah. So then they're tough games at any point, but particularly like say those cold weather games in Green Bay and Philadelphia can be difficult. But yeah, I've got them at 11, which might be a bit short of where they'll end up. But it does feel like, say, the most obvious one we've talked about so far in terms of a disparity between the line and where we're expecting the team to be. I think we're fully expecting the team certainly to make the playoffs, heavily odds on to make the playoffs, 10-17, whereas to miss out 27-20. But let's flip over 5-4 to win the AFC South. So that'll be the 3rd time in the last 4 years. 17-2 to win the conference. That's plus 950, plus 850. My maths is terrible. Yeah, plus 850. And then to win the Super Bowl, 18-1 or plus 1800. Yeah, Byron, you talked about 18-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're in that kind of second tier of teams. When we look at kind of odds to win the Super Bowl, why do you think that's kind of such good value?
I think they have the best defense in the league. And as long as the offense, like I say, defensive line / tight ends, running backs, pass protection generally is slightly improved, I just think it's really hard to argue with them. We talked to CJ Stroud earlier about stats from year to year. In 2025, he had his best EPA per play. He had his best completion percentage over expected. He had his best sack avoidance when you consider what that line was. Again, we're not really getting the CJ Stroud conversation. I think we made all our views pretty clear that he's an obvious, easy extension. But if he just plays at that level again and the things around him are slightly better, and there's one name we haven't mentioned yet who kind of love as a player, and we've no idea what we'll get. I don't know if the Texans know what they'll get from Tank Dell. If you can unleash Tank Dell onto this offense in week 8, as a role player, I mean, goodness gracious, the ceiling of the offense really takes off, because then you have to cover Tank Dell because, my goodness, the guy can fly. And then, like you said, Jalen Knowles, that deep slot receiver, who I think is really encouraging. Jaden Higgins going into year 2. Nico Collins is, top 5 wide receiver in the league probably. And then if you just get a higher base level from David Montgomery than you did from Nick Chubb, Woody Marks, a complimentary back. And if you just get, like I said, 20th best O-line play, I just really struggle to see where the floor is in this team. Maybe Tommy Townsend leaving is really impactful, but I struggle to imagine so. Punters are people too, but they're not normally game winners. So, I just struggle I don't really see where the floor is on the team. So that's kind of my big takeaway here. I think 18-1 is a really long price. I think we got them at 20-1 a few weeks ago when we done our early season bets when the Texans were my pick. So, yeah, I mean, if you can find me a big flaw here that I'm missing, be my guess, but I struggle to see it. So
that's great stuff. I agree with a lot of that. I mean, obviously, again, I'm biased, but your points are spot on. And, relative to the other ones that are ahead of them as far as favorites, I don't know why there's this big gap. There's the top 5 or 6, and then the Texans are, it's why? Like I don't get it.
Yeah, this is our first AFC division preview to do, but I frankly don't understand why. Well, I understand like to some degree, like Buffalo aren't a better team than the Texans. I'm just going to say it flatly, and nor are the Ravens. And like both of those have new head coaches. They both have brand new head coaches who are doing it for the first time as well. And I don't understand why like the Ravens,
Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. It's all based off of the quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I do understand.
Which they themselves haven't been playing. Like Josh Allen had a bad playoffs, and Lamar had a bad year last year.
Well, they've all three of them, C.J. Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen have all won the same amount of Super Bowls. So like, I don't get why those teams are 11-1, 12-1. I think roughly. I don't have the odds in front of me, but I know they're behind the Rams, but like I think they're like third and fourth with brand new head coaches, new schemes. I just don't get it. The Texans have tried and true. You know what you're getting, and I don't understand why those teams are so far ahead of them in the pricing, but I like it because it means we get a better price. So
it does, yeah. I mean, they are the 6th AFC team, if you look in the line of the odds, which seems insane. So you got the Rams are just way out on their own. The Rams are 11-2, so that's plus 550. Sorry, I'm trying to do the conversion on the fly, Garrett. Yeah, 11-2 plus 550, and then you got the Bills, Ravens at 10, Seahawks 11, Chiefs and Chargers at 16-1, and Patriots. Chiefs, Chargers, Patriots at 16-1, and then the Texans are in that group at 18-1 with the Eagles, Niners, and Detroit Lions. But they're the 6th AFC team, which just seems crap. But part of this is going to be, you mentioned, what the aim has been, get to an AFC championship game. That's not happened yet for the Texans. So sometimes there's a little bit of that to it as well, and you don't achieve it until you achieve it, I guess. You don't do the thing until you do the thing. So and I guess that will change moving forward. But I think 18-1 is great value, and that's a good place to put some of your money. And of course, please gamble responsibly. Garrett, appreciate you. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Some fantastic insight there. And we've gone way over the time we said we'd keep you as well. So apologies.
That's my fault.
But no, all good. It's been fantastic insight. Give us again one more shout out where we can follow you and where we can follow the Houston Stressans.
Yeah, so it's either at Houston Stressans, STRESSANS, or Texans Commenter on X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have a website, HoustonStressans.com, where I sell merch and write articles and got little fun tools on there for fans, like, cap calculators, all that kind of stuff. So
awesome. Well, make sure you go following Garrett, Houston Stressans, at Texans Commenter on X, and go check out the website as well. We can see some of the merch in the background. That flag looks amazing behind you that you've been had all the way through. Thanks for joining us, Garrett. We're going to finish off our episode looking at the Colts, the Titans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Thanks again to Garrett at Texans Stressing on Twitter and all your socials. You'll find him there. We are going to deep dive into the Colts now. 2025 season, very much an up and down one for Shane Steichen and his team. Started out finished 8-9 after an incredibly hot start. Danny Dimes goes down, and so does their season after giving up a first-round pick to get Sauce Gardner in the building. He then went down injured. Brought in Grandad Phillip Rivers, brought in Riley Leonard for a game, and it just all hit the skids. Lost final 7 games of the season. Finished 8-9 in the end, 3rd in the AFC South, missed out on the playoffs for the 5th year in a row after, again, through 10 weeks, I think it was, had the best offense per DVO history, or certainly in an awful long time. Offense finished 8th in total scoring, defense 21st in scoring. Joe, what did you... Any other takeaways of the 2025 season other than it's a game of 2 halves, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they started off 7-1, 8-2, hit the bye. Hunky dory. We sat here thinking, "Oh, is Daniel Jones the story?" Get out of the way, Sam Darnold. How the season ended? Is it all about Danny Dimes?
Yeah.
And what happens there? But it just went downhill after the bye. You mentioned the injury. They just lost the last 2 before that as well. It wasn't heavy defeats, but you're expecting him to come back down to earth, and he had 1 or 2 shaky games. But yeah, that injury in week 14 was certainly a killer for their season. And it feels like every year they keep finishing 8-9 and 9-8, and it's always that they're in that purgatory in terms of where they're going. Offense was a lot better than we expected. Positives: Tyler Warren looked like a true number tight end where he could be competing with McBride and Bowers maybe this year and going forward in terms of who is the best tight end. So that was a positive. Obviously, that defense again. When you look at the players and what they brought in. You mentioned the trade that you expected them to push on and maybe be a little bit better last year, but again, it was another disappointing year. But I think it was like Solskjaer in the season. Was it something like he didn't win one game, or he may have won one game because he was with the Jets, and then he went to the Colts, and his record wasn't great. But yeah, that's another disappointing season for them. It feels like they've got the right piece in terms of the head coach and whatnot, but we'll see. There's been too many 8 and 9s, and we'll get into this year and we can talk about that.
Yeah, I realised I misspoke at the start there as well. I said they traded it first for Solskjaer. It was 2 firsts. I've actually got this coming draft's first round pick is already in New York as well. So all the more reason that they need to have a good season this year. And, we mentioned Danny Dimes coming off injury there, and he was also coming up to be a free agent. And what they did do is they turned dimes into dollars. Danny Dimes re-signs on a 2-year deal. He's fully cleared from his Achilles injury as of this week. That has been reported from Pat McAfee via Danny Dimes himself, I believe. So he signed a 2-year, $88 million contract. I think guaranteed about $50 million, but realistically it's a 2-year contract with plenty of voids after that to help that cap number in future years. I think what you've seen from Danny Dimes in year 1 in Indianapolis, and really what we've seen from Shane Steichen when he has any kind of competency at quarterback, is he can get wins. It's when he doesn't have competency at quarterback, and he's had an awful lot of that in his career in Indianapolis, which I think is hard to pin on Shane Steichen himself. But yeah, the Danny Dimes contract, about $45 million a year. What are your thoughts on the 2-year deal?
Yeah, obviously coming off an Achilles, he got them. I think the money probably where you expect. In terms, probably got a little bit more than I expected. I think Danny Dimes himself was looking for a huge contract, especially how the season started. But you can't really expect much. And I think the problem with the Colts, they have nowhere to go. They haven't gone. You mentioned the first round picks they traded. Obviously, how it looks so far, they whiffed on the Anthony Richardson pick really high, and not every team can recover. I know I talk about my team, but can't recover by picking the last player in the draft to solve that. So they had to go Danny Dimes. There wasn't really anyone out there, I don't think, who could have fit into that system and work with it. I think how the money is, probably if it's a bad fit this year, I think they can get out of it and it'll not be horrendous like it is in other places. But it makes sense, and I think I smiled when you mentioned that he's cleared from the Achilles injury. From Danny Dimes says from him. We don't know how Achilles injuries work, especially with quarterbacks. We've seen it with the past couple of years. We had Rodgers, where that first year back just didn't seem right. And there's been a few players where it feels like it's always the next year where we'll probably be sat here on the headlines being, they're bringing Danny Dimes back. He's had a year to recover. Kirk Cousins was the one as well, so I was trying to think of. Had a year to recover, and he looks like he should be the player that we expect. So I'm not expecting Danny Dimes at the beginning. If you could get like in the middle of like not the worst Danny Dimes, you're probably not going to get the best. Just like in the middle, it gives them a chance. Obviously, we mentioned that defense needs to step up to help out, and some of the moves that they've done on the offense. But I think see what happens with Anthony Richardson. Apparently, he's put a trade request in. Somehow, Chris Ballard still has a job. He must have some deep dark secrets about the Colts owners' families, because how he still got a job when you look at what's happened, it's a bit crazy. It's apparently his final contract, so if he stays again, we know he's got some dirt on them. But I don't know. What are you expecting? What you expect for Dimes? Obviously, he should start. Are you expecting, what we saw at the beginning of the year, the first 10 weeks? Are you expecting something like the 11 to 14 before the injury?
Yeah, I think expecting what he did last year, I think would be really optimistic, because I think as well as we talk about Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins taking an extra year to get back to fitness really, or like real who they were. Daniel Jones is also a mobile quarterback who needs to move around and move the pocket as he goes. And I think without that, I think it could be really rough going. And really, we've seen the best 10-game spell of his career was with Indianapolis. So does Steichen just have this magic dust, or is that the best we'll ever see of Danny Dimes? I lean more to the latter. I think he'll still be better than he was in New York, probably, for the most part. But, we actually don't have it on one of our headlines here because there's an awful lot happened in Indianapolis. But he has also lost Michael Pittman, who was a very reliable receiver. Didn't make it onto our headlines here. Didn't make it onto the free agency, of course. But, yes, I think, you lose a big weapon. and you probably lose some efficiency from the quarterback. I think it's going to be really hard to get back to the heights they had at their best last year. But I do think it will be better overall than, post-injury Daniel Jones, because, even if he's 75% of what we've seen last year, I think it's fair to say that's going to come out better than Phillip Rivers. As much as I respect him for going out there and doing it, I would expect Daniel Jones to be able to run a more pro-level offense and, 40 whatever years Phillip Rivers was to go with that.
Yeah, and he certainly helps having a good offensive line. I think just, looking at last year, PFF had Colts the second best offensive line, and that's what you expect from a team that they lost a few players in free agency. So they're able to bring that back, and because it feels like that's their identity. So at least they have that kind of efficiency to help them out, hopefully, in a number of games. Yeah,
and they also bringing back what is now their wide receiver 1, I believe. So Alec Pierce is the wide receiver contract bubble. It now comes in at 14th APY amongst wide receivers. Colts splashed the cap to keep Pierce from hitting free agency. He signed basically the day before free agency opened. We were, kind of penciling him into like Las Vegas, maybe one of these teams who would have a ton to spend. But no, the Colts go big on bringing Alec Pierce back into the building. Obviously, a lot of money, but what are you thinking there, Joe?
I think it was a surprise. I think once everything happened, it makes sense. You mentioned the trade of Pittman. But they're two different kind of players. He's one of them players where he has such like an explosive game where, we just look at it, last year he had over 1,000 yards and he only received reception 47. But is that what you really want as your number one wide receiver? Is that like the second piece where you have someone who is a ball hog who gets the ball quite often? And I might think, with having Tyler Warren and him stepping up and being that guy, can Pierce still happen? Obviously, it came out that he had to have surgery on his ankle as well, which they weren't expecting, and he's coming on the PUP. Apparently, he's a week or two away from coming back, but that's a bit dodgy, that the fact that you got paid that much and then suddenly needs surgery on an ankle. Hopefully, it's not too serious, but still, it's not great.
Absolutely.
And it is a lot of money, but we say this all the time with the contracts. Maybe in a year's time, it'll be way down on like 24th, and it's like, okay, he's getting 1,000 yards. It makes sense why. But when you look at the whole room collectively, it is a bit light. When you think Alex Pierce is number one, I would say like Tyler Warren, I know he's a tight end, but really he's probably their true number one. And with Pierce, I think Josh Downs, I do really like Josh Downs, but he needs to step up. He's now that wide receiver too, and I think he could be a sneaky fantasy pick in terms of like the mid rounds who might get a lot of targets. Just with everyone they got, they brought Nick Westbrook-Akine in. I think the third one currently is Ashton Doolin, who only last year got 100 yards. So it's not amazing. That's your starting three. But they might try and it's all about running that rock with Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, so I think if they didn't sign Alex Pierce, they would have been in a lot more trouble when you see what they ended up with.
Yeah, especially no first round pick, as we already mentioned with the Sauce Gardner deal. I mentioned Josh Downs. Shane Steichen did say they're hoping to get him more involved. He's largely just been a slot player in the NFL so far. He gets great, yards per route run numbers, but until they're willing to throw him out there in two wide receiver sets, he has been a bit of a tough click for me in fantasy. But they said they're going to look to get him more involved in those sets, which I think you kind of have to. Like you say, if Ashton Doolin or Nick Westbrook-Akine is your next bet, you really better hope you've got something in Josh Downs. But I did see this great stat from Jared Smoller over at Draft Sharks. Downs has totaled in his 3 years from 12 personnel, 33 routes and 12 targets. So, he has just not played that role at all. So, I think the potential's certainly there. I've been a Josh Downs fan in years gone by. And I'd love to see him take on a full-time role. And I think the Colts, like you said, they're going to need to see it come from him because, if not, I don't know what they're going to do because Alec Pierce already injured and he's such a big play threat. But, yeah, with low catch totals, it's hard to structure your offense around that. What they did do as well, move on to the defense of it all now. Franklin, my dear, we need a DT Dam. Tackle machine Zaire Franklin has traded to the Packers for defensive tackle Colby Wooden. Franklin has been the tackles leader in Indianapolis really since Shaq Leonard left town. They've had a change up here, decided to get Caleb Woolen in, focus more in the trenches, get a little younger as well. Franklin, I think, is 29. Woolen is 24. So trying to get younger there. But, as the leaves you a hole, we'll see how they address that as we get into the draft of it all. They did take a linebacker relatively early. So we've got that one there. And I think our next slide covers the defense as well. So we'll tackle these together, I think, probably be the best way. A new D in Indy, indeed. Lou Anarumo gets a full overhaul defense through free agency and the draft for year 2. Much improvement needed for 2025, for 2026, after 2025. As we've seen, they were 21st in defensive scoring. They were 23rd in defensive yards given up. Really an underwhelming unit overall on defense. Lou Anarumo came in pretty big reputation after his Bengals days. And kind of a lot of everything going on in Indy through 2026 free agency. Let me just bring up the list here. Brought in Arden Key, Michael Clemens, Neandy, Jonathan Owens, Junior Thomas, Jerry Tillery. We just mentioned the trade already. Cam Taylor-Britt came in at cornerback. I think it was about 11 new players total. And if you look at our lads, there's an awful lot of yellow, awful lot of purple, which is rookies and free agent signings. So we've seen what I think will be the flaw of this defense. We do like their pass rushers in years gone by, but it was a real issue last year getting to the quarterback period. Latu topped out with 8.5 sacks and really, slowing scoring down, ranking in the bottom quartile there of the NFL. So any optimism of the defense being fixed with these changes? Anything that stands out to you, Joe?
Yeah. It's always hard when you have just a massive haul. Obviously, defenses can go so up and down, so it's hard to predict year on year, except certain teams. But when you look at the draft, we'll get onto it, but they had their first 5 out of the first 6 picks were all defense. And when you look at their current depth squad, especially linebacker, the 2 they selected in the 2nd and 4th round, they're currently starting. Yeah. I don't know if that's a great sign, especially linebackers, where it feels like they grow into that position. There's not, there's certainly the class acts who come into the league and hit off straight away, but usually it takes a year or 2 for them to bed in to get used to the NFL speed. So to rely on that straight away, DeForest Buckner, his health's an issue. So apparently had a herniated disc after neck surgery. Apparently he's clear for training camp, so that's good news, but he's massive. Pardon the pun, but whether they need him to step up. You mentioned Latu, who I think he had a good year last year, but they need him to step up with where they drafted him to be that 12, 13 kind of sack points. I think me and Paul, I think it was 2 years ago, we both had them, getting number 1 sacks, and they were so low down, and it just feels like it's been that constant like the last few years. So they've got some good pieces. I'd like, when you look at the cornerbacks, it's Sauce Gardner and Tre'Davious Ward. So that's like a great 1-2 cornerback. So hopefully that works out. But there's not many teams. There's been 1 or 2 where the strength is the cornerbacks and it goes either way. It feels like it's usually the line is when that's the strength. That's usually when it's more positive. But we'll see how they step up there. But a lot of young new players into a system, and I think for everyone on that coaching staff, I think it needs to be a successful year. I don't know if it goes 8 and 9 again. I think certainly the coordinators could go. I like Shane Steichen, but if they miss it again, that will be 6 years. And it's been quite some time since they've been there. So it's they certainly need it.
Yeah, someone has to lose a job because apparently it can't be Chris Ballard. Every year we do this, where I was like, surely Chris Ballard's last year if they don't make the playoffs, and then they don't make the playoffs, and it isn't Chris Ballard's last year ever. So. Yeah, a lot of pressure on Shane Steichen, and I do feel a bit for him because, like I say, I think when he's had quarterback play, I think he generates really good quarterback play, but when he's had some level of competency at quarterback, I think he's done really well. It's just Chris Ballard can't get him a quarterback ever. So, let's hope for Indianapolis that Danny Dimes is fit and healthy and everything else. We'll take a quick look at free agency. Anybody we missed off already? I don't think there is really. Nick Cross leaving the safety, Quitty Pay edge. Losing Braden Smith in division, went to the Texans. Mm-hmm. And then, a couple of additions all along that defense, as we mentioned. I think we mentioned all these names already, but Arden Key, Michael Clemens, Cam Davis, Gaver. A lot of free agency additions. And, Michael Pittman got traded to Pittsburgh, I think, for like a 6th or 7th rounder. Pretty minimal, compensation. But a big loss, I think, in that room because a very reliable player. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else to highlight here, John. Unless I've missed somebody you've already skipped, so I'm guessing that's a no. Wonderful. And yeah, the draft class, like you say, 5 of the first 6 on defense. You've got CJ Allen, the linebacker, I think out of Georgia, but I realise I'm going to misspeak. I don't actually check that as I'm talking. He was out of Georgia. Finally got a defensive player right. And yeah, Georgia defensive players been a pretty good standard in the NFL over the last 5-6 years. So CJ Allen was one who was rumoured to be a end of the first round pick. So getting to 53, pretty good value there. I will say nobody else really stands out to me name wise. Defensive scouting, not my huge bag, more of a fantasy guy. So I can tell you about wide receivers, running backs, but yeah, McGowan and Burks, I don't have much of a take on. Anyone who stands out for you, Joe?
Not really. I just think that the 3 out of the 4 first picks are all, depth. When you look at the depth chart, all starters. So
yeah,
they have to come in swinging, and they've took a swing on Burks in the 7th round. We'll see what happens there, because there's certainly open jobs, but you're not really going to get much from a 7th round normally. So yeah, obviously giving away 2 first rounders has certainly hurt them in team building.
Yeah, they better hope Sauce Gardner is fit and ready to go. We're talking a lot about Alec Pierce and Danny Dimes. I think Sauce Gardner will be ready, but I haven't seen any confirmation, so we shall wait and see on that one. But yeah, might be their most important player, non-quarterback. Colts record 2026 there. Over under line is 7.5. Over is 5-7. Under 11-10. So just on the over is where the bookies expect that. To make the playoffs, yes, 8-5. No, 1-2. I have my record up here. What do I have the Colts as? I have the Colts going 7-10. I would probably lean. Obviously, I have them technically going the under. But I think there's more chance that they end up with like 4 wins than there is a win with like 12 wins. I really struggle to see that ceiling case. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think if Danny Dimes isn't right, if Sauce Gardner isn't right, I think it's really easy to see where the bottom of this goes. Like you say, so many of them rookies are penciled for starting jobs immediately. And I think it's really hard to expect rookies to be professional contributors, in their first season period, but certainly week 1. I think that's always asking a lot. When we've done the Cowboys preview, I've tried to, remain pretty tepid on Caleb Downs year 1, even though I think he's a real special talent. When we get to the AFC West, I think same like Mansour Delaney, who's a top 10 pick. I just think if you approach it conservatively, you're less likely to get yourself burned by expecting rookies to be immediate contributors. And it looks like the Colts backed themselves into a corner here, expecting it. What record do you have for the Colts in 2026, Joe?
Yeah, I have them 6 and 7 wins as well. I have the under. Just when you look at that start, the first 3 games, Ravens, Chiefs, Houston is the first 3 games. Not great. Obviously, we know what happens with the Ravens. It feels like they lose games. They should win. And Chiefs, who knows, with Patrick Mahomes. So they're certainly in it. But big game Houston, and they're playing Washington. I think that's one of the international games. They got Steelers and Titans, Vikings. So it's not too bad. But where they could, I just worry about Danny Dimes. I just don't think he's going to get the Danny Dimes of start of last year. And I think that offense really brought that team along, just like you mentioned, the efficiency and everything they brought. I don't think our defense is strong enough to keep them in low-scoring games, which happened at the end of the season. So, yeah, I think they're going to struggle, and it's going to be a down year for the Colts, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can absolutely see it. Our last slide, I think we know where we're going to be going here. I think it's going to be nose across the board. But to win the division, 18-5, conference 25-1, Super Bowl 55-1. Yeah, it's really easy for me. This is a no across the board. I think, we spoke to Garett earlier on the Texans. Texans, my Super Bowl pick at 18-1. I think they're very comfortably a lot better than the Colts. Truthfully, I'm not sure what would have to happen to have the Colts finish ahead of the Texans this year. So, yeah, none of these interest me. You've got them 6-7 wins, Joe. I think you can take that as a red and move on to Jacksonville via Florida. Jacksonville, Liam Cohen's first year, James Gladstone's first year, 2025, 13-4. Won the AFC South, eliminated in the wild card in the playoffs, 24-27. Close game with the Buffalo Bills, really fun one. On offense, they were 6th in scoring. Defense, 8th in scoring. Very balanced 2025 season. And Liam Cohen was feeling himself, was squaring up to Robert Saleh, was getting everything going. From, Duval to, a playoff appearance where they very nearly knocked Josh Allen out of the playoffs in the wild card, but ultimately came up short themselves. they do now have a first place schedule going into it. Any quick thoughts on the 2025 season, Joe?
I think it certainly blew up my expectations. I do talk. I think Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback, but I think he gets overhyped sometimes just with what he's actually produced. But he actually had a good year at the start of 5-4, and then just racked off win after win. And I think just the overall, the overall team, like you're just looking at the offense and defense, and it's only scoring, but still like to have that balance. And I think the offense took a leap forward. They had like stars appearing, which you weren't expecting, and that defense as well, which you felt like they had good players across the board, but not like full-on superstars. It felt like they played a team, and they were just got it rolling. We talked about the Bills game. It felt like a typical team who just had a great year fall into a team with experience and knows how to win in the wild card, maybe not later on in the playoffs. So they were unlucky that way, but it was a great year, and it's just like, can they continue that? And they didn't even get much from the star round one pick as well, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, that was more impressive doing it that way. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, let's move on to 2026. A weird set of headlines, I will say, for the Jags. There was an awful lot going on with everybody else, and the Jags, it kind of felt like not much happened. I mean, by the fact we started off with RB overhaul, down Tootin. Etienne or Achan goes home to NOLA. Can Bashal Tootin and new signing Chris Rodriguez carry the running game? Couldn't quite fit it on to the headline here, but Chris Rodriguez did work with Liam Cohen at, I believe, Kentucky. Certainly wherever he was at college. I think it's Kentucky. So he is known. He came in on a reasonably good deal for running back. Certainly more than I expected Chris Rodriguez to get paid based on what he's done in the NFL, I will say. So it looks like it's going to be a two-headed monster. Tootin, I think they're penciling in as like the explosive back. Rodriguez probably going to get the dirty work, maybe the goal line work. He's going to make it, I don't want either of them in fantasy, really. I certainly don't want Bashal Tootin where he's being drafted. I think Chris Rodriguez is going to get too many touchdowns or too much of the goal line work, certainly. So we shall see. What are your thoughts after year one of the Liam Cohen running game? Achan had a great year last year, but obviously now in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think that was a surprise, obviously. I'm guessing with how the free agency went, they didn't have loads of money to work with by not bringing him back, because it felt like he finally unlocked something. He felt like one of the running backs where you saw the spark, you could see the potential, and he would have like good to average years. And then finally he had the year where Liam Cohen came in and everything to fit. I thought Liam Cohen's defensive scheme just worked perfectly for him and for the team. I'm curious now, like I was going to ask you about fantasy. Yeah, so with Tootin, he only got 307 yards, and it felt like last year a few people like penciling him for like a late round draft pick just because he might win it out and go. But like
I took him.
He's certainly like just shot up the draft balls now, because I think everyone just thinks he's going to be that number one running back. But last year he had 5 touchdowns, 307 yards, and he only had 10 receptions in the passing game. You'd want a little bit more to lean heavily on him just in general in the NFL and in the fantasy. So I'm curious, and I was also surprised with how much Rodriguez got. But if there's other teams who are after him as well, and that's who they identified, it was a good play for them if it works out.
I do have a great stat on Bashal Tootin that has kind of really crossed off my fantasy boards where he's going. So Bashal Tootin, they bill him as an explosive runner, and I just haven't seen it in the NFL. I don't think he looks like an explosive runner. Maybe he can run in a straight line on a track field fast, maybe, but on an NFL field, I haven't seen it yet. So of all 32 projected starters at quarterback for the 2026 season, every single one of them has a longer career rush than Bashal Tootin's longest career rush. Every single one. And that includes Shadur Sanders, that includes Cam Ward, who, is a rookie just like Bashal Tootin was, and definitely had less than 83 rush attempts. So I found that staggering when I done a little deep dive into Bashal Tootin earlier this season. His longest rush is 15 yards, which Joe Flacco's, who's not a starter, his longest is nearly 40 yards. So, I know Joe Flacco played a lot longer, but I just don't think that's very good for an explosive running back who's already had a year in the NFL. So, I've got real qualms about Tootin. I still trust Liam Cohen to get the best out of the room, though. So, I think Rodriguez might be like a sneaky S-ball pick where I don't need to pick when I play him. He'll just go into the lineup when he scores a touchdown. But in straight-up fantasy where I need to actually pick a lineup, I'm going to struggle to pull the trigger on Tootin, especially He's going, 5th round now around. So, we talked David Montgomery with Garrett earlier. I'd much rather have David Montgomery, even with the poor offensive line. I just think, I struggle to trust Tua, truthfully. Well, what's next for Jacksonville, though? Let's get off the running backs before I talk all day. Trayvon walking to the bank. I was going to go with sacks and stacks again after Will Anderson, but I thought I might get told off if I just keep doing sacks to stacks. Pass rusher gets paid, coming off a bit of a down sack here. They're going to hope he gets back to being a rusher rather than just a walker. So, obviously, Trayvon Walker, I think his career has really been defined by taking ahead of Aiden Hutchinson at this point in his career. But, again, last year, defense played well, but Trayvon Walker has had really an up and down career in terms of sack totals. Last year, he had 3.5 sacks in 14 games. His rookie year, he had 3.5 sacks in 15 games. The 2 middle years, he got 10.5 sacks. So we know that the upside is there to get double digits and maybe push along beyond that. They've paid him big money now, so you know that he's there for the future. What do you think of them extending him this, 4 years into his career? Could have waited another year to see how he did, but they've decided to pull the trigger now.
Yeah, I was actually surprised.
Me too.
Just because they've already got Josh Hines-Allen, who I feel like now with what happened, I think how good he was last year, I think he took another step and he's a premium in that position. So to pay the other side, I know it's a first pick, number one overall pick, so it feels like that has an element that we don't want to look like we made a huge mistake and just let him go after his 5 years. So I was surprised that they didn't tack it on, because when you look at it, like you said, last year his overall grade, he was 55th. If you look at PFF, his pressure was only 40 seconds. Like sometimes sacks can be used as a metric, just where it's like, well, it's not got great sacks, but if the pressure's huge and and he can destroy pockets elsewhere. But I don't think he did that either. And yet, Josh Hines-Allen, it's not like you were the number one edge player to deal with double teams and work off that. So I was surprised in a sense of paying him now because they've waited another year. But on the opposite side, because he was the number one pick, I'm also they're like, let's give him a decent contract. I don't think it's huge money compared to other players, but it was still a lot for the performance last year. But they're probably hoping that he has to bounce back after 2 good years prior to it.
Yeah, they know who he is, I guess. And I think it is always encouraging when, the Gladstone and Cohen regime didn't bring him in. They didn't draft him 1 overall, and yet they've still paid him basically as early as they could. So they obviously like what they see. Presumably a high character player in and around the building as well. But they have lost a big character, trustworthy defensive player as well. Pro Bowler Devin Lloyd leaves. Times his breakout well. His first Pro Bowl season last year. Cashes in, signing in Carolina. And the question I think it has to be, is a replacement in-house in Jacksonville? I did see our former guest and friend of the show, Travis Holmes, put up a graphic earlier this week of Ventrell Miller, linebacker, second-year player last year, who's seen a huge spike in his PFF grades from 24 to 25. Overall defensive grade went from 52 to 72. Missed tackle rate went from 24 down to 7. His catch rate went from 72 to 39. So he was really impactful across the board. And I'm kind of thinking that's probably where they're seeing their Devin Lloyd replacement coming from, because they didn't address it through free agency or the draft class necessarily. So, I think Ventrell Miller is someone that they're going to have to pencil in as that starter. And it'll certainly be a lot cheaper than Devin Lloyd, but I think he is going to be a big loss to that defense. Any other thoughts on that? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to mention Miller as well. There's been a lot of hype around about how good, and I think this is what good teams do. Devin Lloyd is a solid player, but he's not in the top 5 linebackers. So they're the people you got to keep. It felt like he could easily pay him, and then he has a couple of down years. We've seen that a lot. So if you identify who these players are, he's getting older, you getting younger on a cheaper contract, so you can replace players elsewhere which are actually in trouble where you haven't got young players. So I think it's a smart move, obviously, depending if Ventrell Miller takes that next step again. But what he's shown so far, I think he's certainly up for stepping in that, because, like I said, I think Devin Lloyd's a good player. But is he, a defense-changing player? I don't think so. So I think this is where smart teams do well, and then bad teams sign these kind of players for ridiculous money, and then 2 years down the line, they're playing someone else on low money. So I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, and one maybe addition on defense, we shall see. We're not quite sure how his role will play out, but Travis is hunting for a set role. That is Travis Hunter, not our friend of the show, Travis Holmes, to be clear. As a majority of wide receivers, a rookie, played 67% of snaps on offense and 36%, I believe it was, on defense. Does that flip this year? It seems like they're indicating to be more cornerback than wide receiver. And then after injury, do we think the Jags will scale back the dual usage? Travis Hunter is such an interesting player. Played 7 games before injury last year. It's funny for how much we talk about him, and I'm more than guilty of it. I talk about it probably more than anyone else. He had 28 receptions, 298 yards, which, I mean, it's not bad through 7 games, but like all this talk for a player who had less than 300 yards as a rookie is kind of funny. His final game was 101 yards against the Rams, where it looked like he was finally coming through and then tears his knee up. So what do you envision his role to be? Or do you think it's going to be a week-to-week thing? Do you think there's going to be any kind of certainty around it come week 1?
Yeah, it's a strange one because it felt like a couple of months ago it got decided that, okay, second year is going to play defensive back all the time. And then when we've got certain packages, he's going to play wide receiver. That's how it felt, but it feels like as the summer's going on, there's that hype train again.
Yeah.
With everything around it. He's obviously big. Obviously, they traded a few picks to move up that. Gladstone made that famous speech where some players will change the game forever, and that's the way he's selling Travis Hunter. But like you mentioned, he wasn't a great first year. If your number 2 pick wide receiver got you that, you'd say it wasn't. We talk about Marvin Harrison being a disappointment for the Cardinals. It's he managed to get more yards than that. So I don't want to limit him because I feel like he can be the 2-down player, and he can be generational. But obviously, clearly didn't work the first year. So I think it needs to be a point where Leon Cohen and the rest of the staff need to just be like, okay, we're going to just play him DB. Because he wasn't even like he was a shutdown defensive back and, oh, holy shit, he's one of the best defensive backs in the league as well. So he's just getting an average player at both positions. Is it better to just say, let's focus on his best one, let him be a superstar? And I feel like it's easier to do that on defensive back and bringing in for certain packages as a wide receiver rather than being a wide receiver and then just putting him into certain players as DB. So that's how I think he would play, but who knows? And we'll see where they go. But I feel that it needs to be something a little bit better this year because I think that was probably one of the disappointments of 2025.
Yeah, and our lads obviously there's no official depth charts out right now, but our lads have been penciled in as cornerback starter, wide receiver backup. I think that's probably how it'll go. I still think, again, for fantasy, where he goes, I think it's still worth an upside play, again, especially in best ball leagues where you don't need to decide when you play him. If he scores enough, he'll just play in your lineup. Again, in proper redraft leagues, I think it's going to be a hard click, unless you have really deep benches, of course. But I just think, again, we're not going to get onto any. This is our last headline here, but they've got Brian Thomas, they've got Jacoby Myers, they've got Parker Washington, they've got Brenton Strange, they've got the running backs. It is, I'm not going to say crowded, but like they're not glaring need at wide receiver, certainly, while everyone's fit and healthy. So, if they can use him more as a luxury player at wide receiver and a full-time player at defensive back, that seems the way the roster's constructed that I expect him to go. But I kind of just can't wait to see him fit and healthy and back on the field, though, because he is such an interesting player. So we'll see where they go there. We've got our free agency wrap-up here. So, yeah, as well as Chris Rodriguez, I think the big name here is Ruka Corojo, who they brought in from the Falcons via trade. And then obviously lost Devin Lloyd, lost Travis Etienne, we mentioned. Greg Newsome leaves as cornerback. He only came in last season from Cleveland. But that does free up that role for Travis Hunter. I don't think there's anyone else we've missed off here. It was a very quiet off-season from the Jags. Like I say, I kind of struggled with getting the 4 headlines together, truthfully. When you look at, we'll get to the Titans next, you look at what the Colts did, the Texans have all done. But the Jags kind of just like, we know what we have, we're happy with it. We'll go into 26. Anyone you want to touch on, Joe, or just move to the draft?
Yeah, I would say it's a strange one where it feels like they haven't changed much of their starting lineup, but I think there's been like 30 newcomers in terms of talk about the draft and and the 90-man squad. I don't think many of them will make it, but it's been a turnover that way. But I think it's a clever turnover where they're getting rid of the fat and the players who they don't need, and bringing in some young players to fill their depth squads to help you out in the future. Because this was certainly one. When you look at the draft, they did draft actually quite a lot of players to fit them all on. It was a bit of a squeeze.
Yeah, and it was like we mentioned earlier, they traded up for Travis Hunter in 2025, so they had no first-round picks. So their first pick was Nate Bokercher, the tight end, who I think is going to be more of a blocker than anything else, getting on that, the blocking tight end 12 personnel, or 13 personnel, should I say, trend. To have the Jacksonville Jaguars up here as well. I do think there's a little bit of hype around Tanner Kozoli, the tight end who took in the 5th round. I've seen his name around a little bit. And I did like the pick of Emmanuel Pregnon, the guard. Again, I think the offensive line played pretty well last year, but Pregnon will come in as a rotational piece there. And again, was another one who was rumored to be around the end of the 1st round. There was talk of start of the 2nd round. It ended up going 88. So you never know, like, has someone got a value there, or did nobody know what they're talking about beforehand? We're never quite sure. But yeah, an awful lot of bodies, an awful lot of names. We shall see exactly what they get out of it. None of them are projected to start as per our lads. Anybody stand out here, Joe, for you?
Yeah, I think you said it well in terms of they're all like depth pieces. The 2 tight ends. I think I wonder if Albert Regis will play with the trade. The 2 wide receivers are interesting in Cameron and Williams, both in the 6th round, just because, I think they're definitely not starting just with the depth. You're expecting a bounce back from Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, and Parker Washington had a great year. If Travis Hunter does take that step back, then there's room for, Cameron and Williams maybe to, be that 4th wide receiver. But like you said, they play a lot of tight ends sets, so probably the 2 tight ends will probably see the more field, and probably more special team kind of player. So I think a lot of these drafts are, let's see what they're like in a year or two, because of a lot of depth pieces, and if they can get some field time to, hopefully make that jump.
Absolutely. And we'll go look at their future odds. So the Jags are over-under is 8.5 wins. The over is 5-7, under 11-10, so slightly weighted to the over there. Make the playoffs even money, yes. No, 20-23. So the book is saying they're not going to make the playoffs, but they will get 9 wins. So fine balancing act there. Probably just bang on 9, I guess, is where they have them. And that happens to be where I have them as well, which, I was really big on the Jags last year. I think I had them over 12 wins was one of my favourite bets. Or maybe it was over 10, I can't quite remember. But it was a real nice price. My struggle this year is they have the first place schedule. They also play the, AFC North and NFC East. So, you've got the Eagles, Ravens, Bengals, Cowboys, and, some other not so good teams, obviously. But, I can see the Jags competing with all of those teams, but they just play a lot of those good teams this year. So, they do have those back-to-back London games, Eagles and Texans. I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative, truthfully, because those are both home games they're giving up. But they are familiar with London, so it's a real tough act there. So, I have them at 9 and 8. I think the line, truthfully, is just not going to one on bet. Make the playoffs even money. Again, probably one I'll just ignore and leave out. But if I had to, I'd probably bet on them making the playoffs rather than not making it, just get a slightly better price. And I do trust Liam Cohen a lot. I think he's a really good head coach. I think he's a really good offensive coordinator. Where do you have the Jags finishing up?
Yeah, I'm actually at 10 wins. I think they're going to sneak into the playoffs. I think, I do agree with the schedules. I think when you look at what they play favourites, it's probably like 8 or 9 games. So it's the games against the teams where, the Patriots, when they play the Texans, the Bengals, the Ravens, teams like against the Bears, like, I can see them winning them games. I think they proved that last year, just getting a roll. And I just, did like what Liam Cohen did last year, an extra year, more improvement with Trevor Lawrence. And, I think they can make it 10 wins. I think they've got some, some games where they should win and get to like 8 wins and 8 or 9 wins. And then it's just they toss up games where, they're playing the Texans twice. I think the Texans will be playing favourites for both, but would I be surprised if they split? Because no, not at all, because that happens. And I do like that evens price. Just I can see them sneaking in as a wildcard team. And if, there's certain teams that are around that bubble, it feels like with the AFC that there's a big gap between the good teams and the bad teams. So you want them around like the 7, 8, 9 mark, best team in the division. I think that's where Jacksonville lands. And do like that evens and probably put a bit of money on that because I think they can sneak in.
Grand. And we saved the not best till last. We are going. Sorry, I've completely forgot about the next slide. We've got the division 11-5, conference 14-1, Super Bowl 28-1. I really like the Texans this year, so it's really tough for me to see it. I do like nearly 2-1 on the division in itself, but it's probably not a line I'll bet because I just think the Texans are going to take the division. Any of these stand out to you, Joe?
Yeah, I'm the same. Like the divisions, it is tempting just with the price, but 14s. I think the AFC is just a little bit stacked at the top, and I don't think they've got. I think they need. Again, they're one of them teams that's like, I need to prove it year. I think the Patriots, got rid of that. Probably that way of thinking how I should, but I feel like the Jacksonville's in this. They would have to do that kind of run and have a couple of more years in the playoffs, actually get past the wild card and get into a conference championship to show that they've got that mettle and the ability to beat the teams who are like always there. I'll probably stay away. But Division Ones, if you are more probably closer thinking in the Texans and Jags, probably then what me and Byron are, I would certainly like that price.
Absolutely. And now we've saved not the best till last. We are on to the Tennessee Titans. Sorry, Titans fans, but your team is what they are. 2025 record 3-14. Unsurprisingly, that is fourth in the AFC South. Missed the playoffs for the fourth year in a row, and this is where we get really ugly, I'm afraid. Offense 30th in scoring, defense 28th in scoring. They got rid of the head coach, obviously, mid-season. Cam Ward had flashes as a rookie, but I struggle to take really much positive away from the 2025 season for the Titans. They did get the number 3 pick, so they got to make a big contribution for this year. But in terms of 2025, Cam Ward looked okay. I think you might want to see a little more, but the pass catchers were really a mixed bunch at best. A lot of rookies who were drafted pretty low in the draft as well, so you couldn't really expect much more from them themselves. Tony Pollard was pretty good for himself. I think he had another 1,000-yard rushing season, but by and large, a really poor season. I don't think there's really too much to talk about here, unless, please, Joe, if you've anything to touch on in particular, 2025 Titans, but I think they would probably rather look ahead to 26 as well.
Yeah, I think Cam Ward probably did as best as he could do with what everything will happen. Obviously, the head coach going. You expected big things with that offensive line, just with the staff they had in place, and I think just the overall just product in terms of, like you mentioned, the wide receiver catches. When you look at who was on that depth, it was who's who, and the defense had some, I was going to say some good moments, but they were still 28th. I think he was just a shambles all the way around, so you can't really expect much there. But we're going to 2026, which I'm actually kind of impressed what they've done. So
yeah. Let's dive into 2026. Like we mentioned, they got rid of their coach, Brian Callahan. New head coach, Titans enter their Saleh days. Robert Saleh gets his second chance as a head coach, bringing experienced coordinators on board with him. Brian Dable as offensive coordinator and Gus Bradley, defensive coordinator. Obviously, Joe, you're familiar much more than I am with Robert Saleh being a Niners fan. I think his time with the Jets, it's tough to judge because, again, I don't think it was terrible. And I think, like we say with a lot of these bad teams, if you don't have a quarterback, it's really hard to do much of anything. And for the vast majority of his reign, he had Garett Wilson. So I struggle to judge, not Garett Wilson, Zach Wilson. If you had a player like Garett Wilson's level as a quarterback, you'd be very happy as a Jets fan. But he's just a wide receiver, unfortunately. So, I don't want to say, judge Saleh too harshly on the New York Jets. I don't think it went well, but I don't know how much of him is on Robert Saleh. Nobody's coached well in New York since Rex Ryan, basically. So I don't want to judge him too harshly. I'm pleased he's got another opportunity. I'll let you speak, Robert Saleh, from his San Fran days especially. Yeah,
I actually really like this hire. And it was interesting. He felt like he could have gone to a few teams and choosing the Titans just with what they got in place and maybe the control he would have compared to other teams. I think when you look at them Jets days, his defense was always ranked highly. I think that can't be taken away. Hopefully he's learned in terms of how to deal with the overall job that you're not just a coordinator, and that is the worry, because he obviously came back to the 49ers last year and did a great job and helped his stock with a team which didn't have many fit players or high quality players. That he coached them up and got actually it was a respectable defense. So I think I really like that he's brought Brian Dable, especially at OC. I think that's a great hire. I think what the times he had with the Jets, he brought a lot of like San Fran coordinators. Obviously, one's just got a job. I think did he have Kubiak? Did he have LeFleur? I think he had LeFleur. Which didn't work out. Obviously, he had the disaster with Nate Hackett as well when he brought Aaron Rodgers in. And that I feel like as soon as they brought Aaron Rodgers in, that was like he no longer was in charge. And I think that's where it went wrong. And being in New York, so I think being in Tennessee, where the spotlight's not hugely on him, and can he do a kind of job what Vrabel did, with what he came in and just felt like he ran that organization. So I think that's what I expect. Bringing in Dable, Cam Ward's, you can't say he's Josh Allen until I don't think he's got that quality, but he certainly can make him a hell of a lot better player. And he got Danny Dimes paid as well in New York. So Bradley's just he was at 49ers as well. I think it's just someone who's worked with him. I think it's going to be Salah's defense. So you just hope that he's learned how to manage a whole organization. But I do actually like the hire and what he can bring to get that defense to what it was, get it away from was it 28th last year? Can he get like mid to 10th to 15th this year? Give Cam Ward a chance where he's not chasing games and not doing silly moves. And that might be great bringing Dable in, because that was Josh Allen's MO, and he still does that now, where he goes for the hero ball, and it's great seeing him running around and then launching across his body to the other end and it all working out. But then you have plenty of bad plays too as well. So hopefully Dable can improve that, and we actually see an interesting, fun team, because there's still some question marks on that offense, but I think that the defense, in terms of some of the star players they've got, I think it could be it can go really well.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Simmons, an all-pro on a 3-win team, really tells you a lot. 11 or 11.5 sacks, I think it was 11. Yeah, 11 sacks last year. One of the best defensive tackles in the league, and I'm sure Robert Saleh will be looking very much forward to working with him. But we're going to look at the other side of the ball on our next headline here. We've got a pass catcher changeover in Tennessee, very much needed. Wan'Dale Robinson reunited with Dable on a bumper deal, and then a big surprise. I thought on draft night they take Carnell Tate 3rd overall. I think we were all penciling a linebacker there, probably an edge rusher. And no, they go Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. And you look at last year's pass catchers. Their leading pass catcher in terms of receptions was Chigakonkwo, who's now on the Commanders. Chimera DK was their second leading receiver with 48 catches, which is that's really low for your leading wide receiver, obviously. Their next wide receiver was Elik Ayomana with 41, and then you've got Van Jefferson at 29. These are all absolutely appalling totals, really. So, Wan'Dale Tate as your 1-2. See what you get out of Calvin Ridley, who missed an awful lot of last season. I played 7 games, 17 catches, really a non-entity. But Wan'Dale, a disrespected player, I think, early in his career, but his last 2 years, over 100 catches under Brian Dable, crucially. And then Carnell Tate, I think everybody's unanimous top 2 wide receiver in the draft class, if not number 1. I prefer Jordan Tyson slightly, but I think those two are really elite level prospects. That should certainly help Cam Ward out a ton, give him those options. They do still have, we mentioned DK there, we mentioned Elik Ayomana, Gunnar Helm still there. Those 3 were all rookies last year, so there should be room for them to grow as well. And yeah, the only one you've lost is Chigakonkwo, which fun player, sure, but it's 56 receptions for 500 yards. And it's not lighting the world on fire. So I am intrigued by this pass catching group. How are you feeling? Obviously, they paid a lot for Wan'Dale, but we talked Alec Pierce earlier. That's just what you have to do if you want to bring players to your franchise. Yeah,
I actually, again, love what they did. When you look at what they had last year compared to this year, I would just say he was taken 4th overall in the draft. Jeremiah Love was 3rd, just in case anyone points it out. I think they've done a smart thing. You never know with wide receivers. We've seen them hit big time, taken early, and some taken a while to get going. But why not? You need your quarterback. You need to know. We've been in so many positions where they don't do anything for the quarterback until it's too late. So why not get him the pass catcher? They've drafted heavily on the offensive line. It feels like the last few years, bringing in players like J.C. Latham, Skoronski a few years ago. So they need and paying quite a lot of money as well. So it feels like they've invested in the O-line. It might not quite have worked out how they wanted it to, but still, you need to look at your wide receivers because he just didn't have anyone to throw to. Calvin Ridley's the interesting one. Will he still be on the? I think he's getting paid quite a bit of money, but last year he had a bit of a down year, 300 yards. But the year before that, he had 1,000 yards, and the year before that for Jacksonville, he had 1,000 yards. So can he bounce back and get 500-600 yards? And then if he's that with what DK did and you've got 5 good pass catchers there, and that certainly helps out. And you've got Tajee Spears in the running back as well who can catch. So I actually like what they've done in that sense. Why not? Wanda Robinson had a great year for the Giants compared to what we expected from him. So give Cam Ward as much as possible and see what you've got done. Go where we hear in a year time, 2 years time, saying, oh, well, he's not really had the pass catchers. Can we really judge him? Blah, blah, blah. Get him some good weapons. Keep building on that. It feels like, we talk about the defense, but Bob Saleh can coach a lot of defenses up. So why not go big with the pass catchers?
Absolutely. And we will get to Bob Saleh and his defense again right now. D-line seen no decline. Saleh gets to work boost in the front with Franklin Myers headlining the moves, along with some Bob Saleh favorites, Jermaine Johnson, Solomon Thomas, and Elliott coming over, who he's worked with all before. Jordan Elliott, that is from San Francisco. So very familiar players. And Jonathan Franklin Myers out of Denver, obviously headlines that. Front now looking a little scary. Tavondre Sweat went to the Jets to bring in Jermaine Johnson. But you've got Jermaine Johnson, Jordan Elliott, Jeffrey Simmons, Franklin Myers as your front 4 there. That should bode you better than last year's 28th scoring defense, I would dare say. And then, you do have those Solomon Thomas as well in rotation as well with some rookies. So I think again, you'll speak to this more than I can, but I think Bob Saleh, I think of his specialty is that front 7, engineering, pass rush, and through scheme, but also through man management. I think he's one of the real good motivators at defensive play calling in the league, in my experience. So, what do you think of this D-line work?
Yeah, again, bringing in players who he knows. I think they've obviously spent big on Franklin Myers, which I don't mind as well, because obviously last year they missed out on Milton Williams. It felt like he was in the building more or less, and then suddenly just went off to the Patriots. So you might have to pay a little bit of money to get people up. I'm sure Tennessee's a great place to live, but it's not a sexy franchise really in terms of attracting players to move there. So you might have to pay a little bit, and why not get Franklin Myers, who had a good year at the Broncos, bring that winning mentality. You got Jeffrey Simmons. I was interested with the Sweat one because it felt like, I know he was a Paul favorite, and I know Paul liked Sweat, but I feel that they played a lot of 3-4 defenses last year, and I think they're going to revert to 4-3, which Bob Saleh plays more of. So he was just a casualty in terms of, the scheme not fitting him anymore. And, you got Jermaine. So you've just got 2 starting defensive edges, and Jermaine Johnson, Franklin Myers, with that Jeffrey Simmons powerhouse in the middle, and then you can just rotate the other defensive tackles. So I think having all of them helps with with the linebackers, with the rest of the defense. I think they've just done a good job in let's lift this floor. We've got brand new 2 defensive edges. Because can you name who the defensive edges were for Tennessee last year in terms of who was the star one? What sacks did they get? I know Simmons probably got the most, but in terms of what they've improved, they've increased the floor massively. And I think this is what the team needs. How bad they were last year, let's get it to average to good, which Bob Saleh can do. They might not get that, top 5 defense, which Bob Saleh's known for maybe for 2 or 3 years until he gets all his players in. Yeah. But let's just increase it so we're not down 20-0 within the first quarter, second quarter, and we're chasing games and we're having to get Cam Ward throwing here, there, and everywhere. Let's be able to establish a run. Let's be able to, play smart football, and I think that's what he's done bringing in these players.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of the Titans' edges. I think Arden Key might have been on their roster last year. Yeah. But then I started thinking that could have been any of the last 3 years, and I think he spent a year in Tennessee. So I don't even know if that was last year or not. And he went to very little fanfare if it was. So, very good point. And as well as the D-line seeing no decline, they've also boosted the secondary. So the front has been sorted first, secondary second. Titans tried to rebuild the secondary with 2 big cornerback signings. They brought in Alontae Taylor from... a minute ago, and from New Orleans, thank you very much, and Cordell Flott from the New York Giants. And then they also added in Joshua Williams from Kansas City and Tony Adams from Arsenal / the New York Jets. So, yeah, a lot of, well, 2 new starters there, crucially, 2 new rotational pieces as well. We see what Robert Saleh is all about. Obviously, a lot of improvements across the board, but you get that front going. I think the secondary should benefit from that in itself, but then also you bring in these 2 new pieces. I think just really good team building across the way here for the Titans. Any particulars to add here, Joe?
Yeah, obviously they're not like super sexy, but again, it just increases that floor. I think they've spent big previously on cornerback, where certainly not helped with Snead. So gaining young players, one's only so Taylor's only 27, Flott's only 24. So the young players, they can be coached up. When you think about the 49ers in terms of like the salad days, we never really we have Tre'Davious Ward for a number of years to try and help that, but we always had like not superstar cornerbacks; they were just average to good cornerbacks.
Yeah.
So that's why he needs to help his defense, and I think again spending wisely, increasing the floor, help get a decent secondary to help out the front, and vice versa. You should hopefully see improvement. So again, I think it's been smart what the Titans have done this year.
Absolutely. Let's have a quick look at the rest of free agency. Anybody we missed out here? So we've got Wandale, Franklin Myers, Taylor, and Flott, the big names. Losing, we mentioned Okonkwo, went to Washington. It was Arden Key, to the Colts. L'Jarius Sneed back to Kansas City. Terrible signing, didn't work out at all. And then Lloyd Cushenberry, the center, left as well. Anybody else to add here, Joe? Any of these we didn't mention already of note? We lost Kevin Zeitler as well. On the line. But yeah, I don't think there was anybody else crazy standout. They did get Tommy Townsend from the Texans as a free agent. Hopefully he doesn't get a ton of work, but I think he might get more than he would like. I don't think there's anybody else who stood out to me, certainly. So
yeah, they're like, brought in Mitch Trubisky. I don't know if that's anything to shout about. And I feel like they've just brought a lot of players into to improve. They obviously re-signed Jeffrey Simmons as well as someone else we didn't speak about. Highest paid defensive tackle for a couple of months until today as we're recording. So yeah, and Joey Sly re-signed, so some kicker love.
Absolutely, you Sly dog. And looking at their Our Lads page, 6 of their starters on defense are new to the building. 6 of their second list of players are new starters, are new players on the defense as well. So an awful lot has gone in there as well. I think it was 5 or 6 of the starters on offense as well are new to the building. So reminds me a little of that Washington Dan Quinn first year of like, just get, we're going to throw a lot of shit at the wall. A lot of it won't stick, but if 50% of it does, we're going to be in a really good position in a year's time because we've now got a new floor of what is acceptable in the building. And I think that's something Saleh will drive home. And then onto the draft class, Carl Tate at 4, as you correctly corrected me on, Joe. Thank you very much. Keldrick Falk at 31 on the D end, and he's actually not even projected to start. He's going to be backing up Franklin Myers or rotating, certainly. Singleton in the 5th round, I think, is an intriguing player. A couple of years ago, he was really hyped in these Devy fantasy football leagues. Obviously, fell off somewhere because he's going 165, not 65. So, not sure exactly what you get in there. Anybody else stand out to you, Joe?
Not really. Again, it doesn't look like many of them slotted in for starting roles. And again, that's not a bad thing for your draft. Like you don't want to rely on. We talked about the Colts, all these rookies to come in and hit the ground running. I think we'll be interested what happens with Falk, with behind Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson. Injuries happen. We'll see what happens. But rotational and just getting the players in because they might have to be on defense a little bit. So you just want to see. Can they contribute? And obviously, Tate is the headline, which you hope he would contribute major because he's probably arguably the wide receiver 1 already between him and Wanda Robinson. So you expected big things, but the rest we'll see if they get game time. And maybe Marshall because I think he's with Jordan Elliott and Solomon Thomas are not, I wouldn't say above average. I think they're probably that average to below average kind of defensive tackle. So he might get some game time depending on how camp goes.
Grand. And let's look at what bookies have got us saying for the Titans in 2026. Over under wins at 6.5. Over under both at even money, so they're really sat on the line at 6.5 there. To make the playoffs, yes, 15-4. No, make the playoffs 2-11. I think this is a crazy high line. Truthfully, I have the Titans at 4-13. despite liking what they've done, I just struggle to find 7 wins on that schedule. So yeah, I have them at 4 wins. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I've got them at 5 wins. And like I said, I've really liked what they've done. I just you mentioned the schedule in terms of the divisions they're playing and the teams within there. I think they could battle the Colts if it comes down to if they pick up a couple of wins and whatnot. But I've got them at 5, just on my predictor at the minute. I think with the Titans, it might not be the wins you're looking for in terms of how good this year is. Does Cam Ward look like the future? Is that defense improving? Does Tate look good? So you've got a solid foundation. It might be the year after where they get another free agency draft with Salah and his team around him to show that improvement and continue and hopefully Dave will work his magic and you can see a future prospect of them actually being good again. I think that's where there's a lot of these teams. We're going to talk about the Browns and a few of them teams where you just don't see how they can improve or what they're going to do to improve. But I feel like what the Titans have done just this year, can we see it? Can it be an interesting team? And I think they can be. So, sorry, Titans, you might not win that many, but you should hopefully have a few, come back next year, and we'll probably see over there.
Absolutely, yeah. And we do finish off the Titans here with, I think, 3 no's, but prices for the division, conference, and Super Bowl. Division 8-1, conference 50-1, Super Bowl 125-1. 3 easy no's for me. Again, I don't think it's where they're contending. They're not on a 1-year path. I don't think Titans fans will be taking any of these either. Maybe they'll take a pluck on the division, maybe a few of them. But I think realistically, you're not competing for the division, so you're certainly not competing for the conference Super Bowl. All in agreement?
Yeah, we'll get into what Paul's betting. I think that's probably the more interesting take about where they actually finish. So we'll move on to Paul's now. I've just mentioned it.
Perfect. So yeah, we always do a player bet and a team bet for every division. Paul goes Nico Collins to have 1,250 plus receiving yards at 13-5. Nico Collins actually only hit that number once in his career. However, last 2 years, basically you need to get 74 yards a game to get above 1,250. He's hit that each of the last 3 seasons. Last year we only played 15 games. The year before we only played 12 games. I think if you get 17 games from Nico Collins, he hits this. So yeah, 13-5 is really a bet on health there, between 2 and 3-1. And then the exact order bet Joe mentioned there: Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Indianapolis. So Tennessee to outdo Indy. The exact order there is 17-2. Interesting price because I think if you go Indy, Tennessee as 3-4, then you get a lot shorter. But here you're baking in a bit of improvement from Tennessee. And, we talked about with the Colts, with the amount of rookies they have starting, bit of a weird depth chart in some ways. The bottom could, I think, very easily fall out in Indianapolis. So, yeah, I like this at 17-2. Anything to add on policy, Joe?
No, I think like what you mentioned, it's that Tennessee Indy, that competition there. You could get some decent odds in terms of because I think they're going to be closer than what the bookies think.
Absolutely. I am up next. I've gone Travis Hunter comeback player of the year at 40-1. This is a short 20 other places, so always shop around with these. Well, all your bets really, but especially like your season award ones because they have such fluctuation. I just think Travis Hunter is one of them players people love talking about, people love voting for. He's a very interesting prospect. Obviously won the Heisman, one of Paul's all-time bets. I forget what the price was now, but it was certainly one he mentioned an awful lot, and it was a big winner for him. And if he comes back and he shines in one of his positions and performs well in the other, I think people will just love to talk about it and love to do it. It's 41 for a reason. It is a quarterback-driven award, as a lot of them are. If Patrick Mahomes comes out after his ACL and shines, it's easy to see how he would get those votes. Same with Danny Dimes if he's, as efficient as last year. But I love the Travis Hunter story. I always do. So, yeah, give me 40-1 on him getting comeback player of the year. And then one kind of an interesting one for me, certainly, is Texans have more wins than the Packers. I think this is a FanDuel market. You can basically bet on every team head-to-head on how many wins they'll get. I have the Texans at 13-4. We discussed earlier with Garrett. And I have the Packers, I believe it was 8 wins, might have been 9 wins, but it was a lot less than 13, certainly. We're getting news this week that Mike Parsons effectively missed the first 6 weeks of the season. I don't get it with the Packers. We're not going to do an NFC North revisit here, but I love the Texans in my Super Bowl pick. So, yeah, them to win more games than the Packers. Truthfully, even if CJ Stroud missed the season, I think I might still fancy this one because Davis Mills is somewhat competent and everything around the team is so good otherwise. So, Yeah, give me the Texans over the Packers, even money. Not a huge price, but I think one that'll certainly win you. And Joe, your two bets to finish it off.
Yeah, I continue with the train of thought. I've got Texans number one, AFC seed. I think just with the schedule they have and just how good that defense is. Like I mentioned, it's hard to predict defenses year in, year out, but it feels like the Texans is one of them where it's like they're just going to be incredible again. And you just need CJ Stroud to. It felt like a decent to good year regular season. Obviously, had a disastrous in the playoffs. So you just want that to continue. Hopefully, no injuries. And I think they're just gonna with how good I think it's gonna be a lot of low scoring games. And I think they're starting to get that winning mentality. So them to be the number one seed is 17-2. I think that's a good price. I think they're maybe the fourth or fifth favorite. And when I did the schedule, I think I had them winning 13-14 games, which I think will be enough to win the AFC. And then my player one is similar for the Titans. So Wan'Dale Robinson over 674.5 yards, basically evens. That was his line. I was surprised how low the line was with how good he was last year. 140 targets, 92 receptions for 1,014 yards on a not a great Giants team. And I know they brought in Tate, but it sometimes can take a couple of weeks for that rookie wide receivers to certainly step up. But when you look at the Giants, when there was the Giants in 2024, when Neighbors had the incredible year as a rookie wide receiver, he still got 140 targets, 93 receptions for 699 yards. So he's done it before with a rookie who was just, we were thinking he may get the most yards by a rookie, by a player. Certainly start that year, so he certainly wasn't the number one there. So I think he could, he's going to get plenty of targets, plenty of receptions, and that's such a low line. So I think he could clear that fairly easily. I think he's going to get at least like above 750, 800. I think it's going to be that kind of year. So at evens at that price, I enjoy. So that's my player bet.
Fantastic. That wraps up the AFC South. Very fun diving in there. Thank you again to Garett at Texans Commentator, Houston Stressans. Go check him out and all his great work. Find all of our great work at GTW_GTC on basically all your socials. Give us a follow and a thumbs up, etc. on YouTube. Subscribe. And we will see you next week for, I believe it'll be the AFC West preview, but it will certainly be AFC something because we've done all the NFC. So we shall see you then. And thanks for joining us.